Live. So here we are. So here we are, Dan. Dan is
Good morning. It's
with.
still morning.
It's still morning. We're live now. Thanks for to the viewers out there. And we are. This is the FANHS Museum pop up, right? The
Okay.
Filipino American. This is the Philip. It says I'm unstable. That's not me. That's the president. No, no. It says that my connection's unstable.
Unfortunately,
But
it's a significant portion of the Republican Party as well.
yeah, well, we're going to talk about that. But first, let me greet those of you who are here with us. I'm Emil Guillermo, the museum director of the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum. You may be seeing this on a number of different places in the internet, our YouTube page, our Facebook Live page. Maybe you're seeing it the first time as we're doing it live. You might see it in a recording. You might see it on amok.com or Emil Guillermo Media, wherever you're seeing it. Welcome. We do this because the museum's closed because of COVID, and we're going live because we want to engage with you in the news of the day. The first, well, it's the history of the day. These are historic times.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have brought him back so soon. I would wait until maybe the inaugural to talk about that, but it was just too much this week. So I thought, let's bring on San Francisco State professor Dan Gonzales, College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American, Filipino American scholar. Dan, welcome to the program as always.
Thank you.
Boy, what a week, huh?
Well, I mean, yeah, an incredible week, but against a lot of people, perception, not at all surprising, and absolutely predictable.
Yeah.
My wife was saying just now that she was elated over the discussion that occurred on one of the MSNBC morning news shows. Um, and
Why?
I asked,
Why? Elated
well,
because
because she felt validated as a person who has heard those same things mentioned over the past few days about the possibilities, the potentiality for a Trump administration. She heard those things initially from me when he first came down the escalator.
Oh, 4
So,
years ago. 4 years.
yep,
Look,
almost about 5
yeah,
years ago, actually. And so
right.
back then, as par for my particular career choice, I have been called several times a communist. I have been called the least that I've been called is a troublemaker. I have been scorned as a person
A
who
left-wing
was an
troublemaker at
alarmist.
that, which is
Yeah,
yeah.
and see, calling me a troublemaker is a badge of courage. I really
Yeah,
should
well,
have.
this is the thing.
I think you've suffered the same thing, actually. Uh-oh.
Well, I think anytime anyone speaks out a certain truth, they get labeled, and certainly the the method of the Trump administration and certainly the Trump campaign was to label everyone who was against him as left-wing, communist, socialist, anti-American. And
Yep.
what did we see this last week? We saw that who was un-American, who was on the side of attacking the government, and who's certainly going to be on the wrong side of history. I think that's what we're talking about now. What is going to be the legacy of this
And it
administration?
depends, as usual, who the
Right?
victors are.
Yeah.
And nowadays,
Yeah.
you don't have to be victorious. You can be a total loser, like the majority of the Republican Party and the people who still vote for them. You can be a total loser okay, and still get to write the books.
Hey, Dan, this is kind of interesting because we have this sort of siloed off media and siloed off information sources.
Yep.
You're right. It's not a matter of the winners tell the stories.
That's right.
It's anyone can tell the story, but it works both ways.
Yes.
If you are on the winning side and say, if people of color and minorities, if they want to write the history, they can. And because we have these silos that are not all like, here's the one voice, we all can tell the story. But now it's unfortunate.
Yeah, but then who's going to read or listen to or watch that story? That's what it comes down to. The silos are not just silos as repositories of information. They're also silos of the informed and misinformed. So you got a whole silo of people that are grossly misinformed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you got accessibility to more accurate information, and only, I would say, a minority of people, and I'm not talking about race,
right?
Only a minority of people. I mean, you got to ask the question: how many people actually read through the entire Constitution? And that's not even asking whether or not they understand it.
Yeah. Well, and they actually, when they're reading the Bill of Rights, they're reading the amendments. They're not reading the whole thing. They're reading this stuff. Oh well, we got to change this. We got,
and there are 17 more of those suckers.
Yeah. All right. So look,
the Bill of Rights is just the first 10.
Right. Right. But see, the point I was making is that it's unfortunate that as things have become more siloed off, as people of color win, as people of color become much more dominant, now all the voices are recognized, and then we have this problem that you're suggesting that, well, which voice is the one that, or which history is the one that gets read or it actually gets taught? That's a real problem.
There you go.
That's a real problem, because in the past it was only the victors that told the history, and then the losers, the minorities, the people of color, no one heard their stories. And now, as we rise, as our stories are more disseminated and told, now the losers, in this case, the formerly white majority, now what will they say? They're saying, hey, well, we're gonna tell our stories in our own little silo, and fortunately, we still run all the establishment institutions, and our voices are going to be, we're going to be the voice of the new minority, the white minority.
And they're the strength of at least 33, if not 37 states.
Right.
Okay. So Arizona has now overtaken California as the hottest of the hot COVID death spots, and COVID infection spots. And there's a stark contrast between policy that was projected by our legislature in California and by the governor, and then the governor and legislature of Arizona. They still don't have distancing or mask requirements. Some cities do, okay, but it's done on a city and county basis. It is not statewide. We've got even worse position with regard to the vaccine that was intended by this Trump administration to be the way out of this COVID-19 epidemic. And we've got Governor DeSantis in Florida screwing up the distribution of the vaccine. And so there are several situations where we may lose the efficacy of the vaccine because the distribution has failed and the vaccines are sensitive to temperature and longevity once exposed to the wrong temperatures or too high a temperature, which is still freezing.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that if you don't get your booster, we don't know. The efficacy of the vaccine is based on, or you take one and then you have the booster shot, and then
that's right.
Now, and then even after the booster shot, you don't know how effective it's going to be, or they still don't know, because, well, they raced to get this on. They think that it's going to be effective. They hope, 80%, 70%, 90%, whatever, but we're still in the process. So,
yes,
everything is mucked up by the fact that the federal government did not take control and left it to the states. And so,
and that is conservative. That's partially conservative ideology.
Right, except when it comes to things like protesting the certification of a vote, then states' rights goes out the window, and someone from Missouri can protest the election in Pennsylvania, or
Right.
someone in Texas like Ted Cruz can protest the
Yeah,
election.
who is now trying to distance himself from the whole thing. Oh,
Well,
this is completely separate and apart what I was arguing.
yeah, this is
It
the
has
thing.
nothing to do. It has nothing to do with people invading the Capitol, you know.
Okay, now, Dan, I want to
And
rein.
he's still going to get votes, Emil.
Yeah, Dan, I
He's
want to
still
rein.
going to get votes.
Dan, I want to rein us in a little bit, because now in the first 10 minutes of our conversation, we've talked about the history, we've talked about
A little bit of the history.
coronavirus and Ted Cruz, which is like way
We've
too.
only talked about a little bit of the history. If you want to fit Filipino American history in, um, I had a lot of relatives. One of my grand uncle, my father's uncle, Venerando C. Gonzales, who I have mentioned previously.
Mhm.
And I have a first cousin resident here in the city and county of San Francisco, who is actually his granddaughter. Okay, so I have immediate relatives. They and they're largely apolitical. Okay, but my granduncle was a Republican, a lifetime Republican, and he lived at our house for a while in the 50s and early 60s. On and off, he would go back and forth between here in Southern California and the Philippines. He eventually married again. I don't know what happened to his first wife, but he had kids from that marriage. Anyway, the point is, he was a Republican. He was erudite. He was college educated. He was also the first publisher and editor of the Philippines Mail. So
Newspaper.
a lot of people have gotten that wrong. They credit Delphine Cruz with that. As a matter of fact, he was the second owner and publisher.
All right, we
And
shall
I
correct. We shall correct the record.
have
He was the editor of the Philippines Mail.
well, and the reason I know this is because um, the retired major Alex Fabros and PhD, he was a candidate for the doctorate at UC Santa Barbara in American history, sent me sometime around 92 a fax, which was of the original legal size printout mimeographed, right, of the Philippines Mail. And there, blazoned on the banner, was the publisher editor Venerando C. Gonzales. And we both had a great laugh
All right.
because Alex is a cousin, so he's related, man.
So, all right. So, what's the point you wanted to make about bringing up
Filipino, he's a Republican.
Oh,
and he took the politics very, very seriously. In San Francisco, the first community newspaper that had longevity was the Mabuhay Republic,
right, which was run
owned
by
and operated by Jess Esteva, who also had a travel company and a financial remuneration to the Philippines company, right?
right.
And my parents sometimes used their services. In fact, on my first trip to the Philippines was handled by Esteva Travel.
Yeah.
I knew Mr. Esteva myself personally. I also knew his son.
Same here. Same here. Look,
everybody knew Esteva. That's right. If you lived in the city, you could not avoid it, right?
Yeah.
So
everyone in San Francisco.
He had the biweekly, right? He had the newspaper, the only periodical, and he was a Republican.
Yeah.
And he supported Dianne Feinstein, not only as mayor, but when she ran for the Senate. So he's well connected.
All right,
Republican.
All right, look, Dan, I like the fact that we're bringing in Filipino American history, but the Filipino American history with the newspapers, because we've talked about that, and we also talked about how conservative they were.
And that's they
good.
had some columnists. They had columnists and opinion writers that were radical, that were clearly socialist in ideology.
But let's bring it back to these times this week. I want to bring it back.
They were unionists.
I want to bring it back to this week though, because
we're making history now. Yeah.
Well, we are making history now, but I want to make the point that a lot of people think insurrection is a Filipino word, right? Because
Insurrecto.
yeah,
Insurrecto.
whenever they heard the term insurrection in the past, it's always
Uh,
been in connection with the Philippines. And the Philippine insurrection is
as it
really
was labeled, yeah.
we have to go back to this idea of who writes history.
They don't want to call it revolution, so
Right.
that's why they call it insurrection.
And
They demean it and diminish it.
and this has always been, and this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation. Who gets to write the history? Who gets to tell the story? Whose story gets read, even though everyone gets to write it now? It's not just the winners. And the labels and the word choices is key. And I was talking about this week just the idea. Are they protesters? Are they mob? Are they a mob? Are they
Terrorists.
domestic terrorists?
Yeah.
Right? Are they, what are these people? Are they disciples or acolytes of Donald Trump? So this is
I think we can't. Once again, we should move in the direction of accuracy, and we can't include all of them as domestic terrorists. So let's go with the most threatening of the definitions, right? Domestic terrorism is the most threatening. Some of the people were definitely domestic terrorists. We have to look at the definitions, the basic ground level definitions of these terms. And terrorism, right? By the way, I was an international relations poli-sci double major, and my expertise was in the area of, check this out, the theory of revolution and war. So this is within my area of expertise. Okay. Terrorism is doing violence or using the threat of violence to further a political agenda. Now, some people say, well, where does that put Islamic terrorism? And the answer is religion is often political. Religion is politics. It's still politics everywhere in the world, and it is politics in the United States of America, right? What is an evangelical? Okay. What do they do? How do they behave? Are there differentiations among evangelicals as to what positions they take on social issues? And what you will rapidly see is ideology. They embrace particular kinds of ideology, and most of them are at least quote unquote with conservative, right? And some of them are outright radically fascist.
right.
Okay,
Although, look,
so domestic terrorists, there were fascists
yeah,
among those people,
sure,
and they're domestic terrorists. On the other hand, the opposite end of this are protesters, people who were there only to protest what they believe was an illegitimate election. Okay,
and that's it. That's it. There was no ideology, had no belief, and that's
that's right.
why when they went to Congress, they had nothing else to do but take a selfie. The other, even the most radical and the most violent amongst them, they had
Doing
nothing
selfies.
else to do but take a selfie of you putting up your feet on Pelosi's desk and taking her lectern. I mean, that was it. That, my criticism is if they were really ideological, had
Revolutionaries,
something
yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
they would have gone up to Congress and they would have talked to Congress and said, why are you doing this? Show me your proof. Show me why, let's do the investigation if they
Okay,
really
let's go.
feel aggrieved.
I agree. Let's agree for a moment on that. Okay. And let's then ask the question that follows, right? Why didn't they do that?
They
And
had
you
nothing.
say because they had nothing better to do. I think we got to get deeper than that.
Go
We
ahead.
got to
Get deep. Get deep. Don't bring up the Philippine mail.
Yeah, that's a different kind of Republican. My purpose was not in glorifying my grand uncle.
I know,
My
but
purpose was saying the Filipino community has a connection to this freaking party. Okay,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they still have a connection to this day.
yeah.
Okay, But the question is, were the people who are connected to this, not only the Republican Party, but this movement that seems to be related, right? This invasion of the Capitol that
Yeah.
seems to be related to the Republican Party, and clearly was indirectly encouraged, right, by members of Congress who were saying the
Sure.
election was fake. The election was not legitimate. There are legitimate concerns with the outcome in at least 6 states. Some of them were saying 8 states. So they're doing all of this stuff. Everybody knew, at least those people who are willing to accept fact, right, knew that this is a false argument, and they've been kicked out of court, what, 60 times out of
All right,
close to
but
70 of,
but
you know.
get to the point that
Well, the point is that they're
these people
frustrated.
had
They
nothing.
don't,
These
they're
people had nothing.
frustrated. No, wait. They want to have Trump for another 4 years. That's their goal. That's their
it.
goal.
But that's it. There's no
Yes.
belief. There's no. I'm saying this is why it's deep when I say they have nothing, because did they talk about, hey, we want education, we want jobs, we want a better economy, we want nothing. They stood for nothing.
Wait a minute.
We want our guns. We want
Yes. We want our guns. Second Amendment is the loudest thing that they talk about, right?
Yeah.
But the other one is the wall. They want to keep brown people out.
They want,
okay?
well,
they want us to go back where we came from. You want some history? The only 2 groups that were ever the subject of repatriation were Mexicans and Filipinos.
Yeah.
Okay, 1935. Stick that in your hat, Republicans.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, this is the thing about what commentators immediately, when they talk about race, they saw what was happening on Wednesday and they said, oh, well, if these were blacks, if these were people of color, they would not be treated with kid gloves, and
they would have gotten mowed down.
Yeah, they would have been mowed down. But it's not just blacks; it's any people of color, and it's true that it was an example of white supremacy, and that these people, while they weren't the people with the hoods, they were the people they were the white supremacists who could afford not to have hoods and just have masks. Or some of them weren't masks. But
did you see that one? I don't know who turned it in, but there was a woman who had, she said, I've been maced. I got maced. Like, wow, man, you shouldn't have been maced.
Well, the thing is,
and then she said, they're supposed to be shooting BLM.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be macing us.
See,
they're not, really?
Yeah. That's the thing that got me, that the crowd was mostly white. But look, as I say that, let us remember that there's some diversity in, I mean, you mentioned it when you said this is egged on by the Republicans and Filipinos are part of the Republican Party, or there are a lot of Filipinos who are Republicans. But among the Trumpsters, let us not forget Cesar Sayok, the Trump van bomber.
Mr. Van, yeah.
He's serving 20 years right now.
Yeah.
He's half Filipino.
Yeah.
Lord knows if he were full Filipino, just how far off he would have been.
No, well, he would have gotten 40 years.
Yeah. Well, sorry, he would have got, but he's diluted at being half.
Now we're being really sick now, man. I mean, but I think I'm embarrassed that I'm laughing about this.
No, right? But it's important to point out Cesar Sayok, because he is the epitome of a kind of Trumpster who would have been there if you were saying, well, they're all mostly white people. No,
and he might have been armed, and he might have had some really good IEDs.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about this movement that we saw go to the rally, and there were the people who were kind of extreme, but the real scary people are the older, it was like a 50 plus crowd, right? And when you saw people interviewed, and mostly white ladies, who were there with their Trump paraphernalia, they're dangerous.
Yes, they are.
Because they're not, a lot of, I mean, the woman who could be seen in the halls of Congress yelling the C word, get Pelosi, white female. I mean, not to diss the feminists on that right. I mean, those are the real feminazis, not the feminine,
not Gloria Steinem,
not the Gloria Steinem type. The feminazis were real feminazis out there yelling at, we're going to get the C word Pelosi, get her, tell her we're coming for her. That's feminazi. Those are the scary types.
Yep.
And, they look acceptable. Why? Because they're white generally, right?
And they look middle class. They look middle class.
And so to broaden it out, they're the middle class who have felt left out. Right.
Yeah. But who are they blaming? And they have, I think they have legitimate grievance.
Sure. That's why
I wish. It's just that they're pointing it in the wrong direction because they have a fallacious understanding both of government, structurally, right, as well as ideology. They don't understand about ideology. They can barely spell the damn word.
They don't know what happened to them over the last 10, exactly 15 years. And so they think, and this is why there's this disconnect between people in society who are saying, I'm in the outs and this diversity thing is not a good thing. Blacks and browns and Asians, they're climbing the ladder, and I'm this white person in the factory, stagnant. Something's wrong.
I have an upper middle class neighbor who is the vice president of a company. And they've been living there for almost as long as we've been living in this neighborhood. We've been in this neighborhood now for 34 years. Okay. Wow. And so they've been here for just under 30 years. I remember when the wife was pregnant with her first son, who's a San Francisco cop, by the way. And so he said to me within this last 2 weeks, see, part of the problem, Dan, is that you have a better chance. If we were out there competing for the same jobs, you have a better chance of getting that job than I do. Okay. And I said, that's just not true, dude. That's just not true. I said, it does depend on what kind of job, right? But it is not true that in any and all instances, you're speaking in generalities, that people of color, if that's why you're referring to me, okay, have this distinctly unfair advantage of, being more likely to get the job than you. That's just not true, So,
but at least he didn't come after you and punch you or, you do violence, because the one thing that you've got going is that you're a neighbor and you talk. And that's the one thing we don't have going with that woman who was yelling the C word in Congress at Pelosi. And right. A lot of those people there, they don't come to see us and talk. And that is why
not unless they have a gun in hand.
Right. And who fomented this division but their fearless leader, Donald Trump.
And well, but see, people credit him with being really brilliant, right? And he's not. Okay. Yeah, you've heard him say it. Right. He's brilliant. He really not. No, he knew an audience. He knew an element of American society that was this massive audience of underinformed people. He didn't even understand how underinformed they were, and he did not care. What he cared about was he could manipulate them. And so he gained popularity by putting on the shade of a show, right, about being able to fire people while they're trying to do business, right? And so it was two things. It was two-pronged. One, it was about here's how capitalism works. And clearly it was a freaking joke, okay? And here's a guy who helps capitalism work by getting rid of people who aren't capable of rendering it efficiently, properly, gainfully, for profit. That's the message, okay? And so he was a savior. Right now, these people, everybody knows, right, that less than 50% of the American population, right, has anything to do with the stock market, and that includes IRAs and all the rest of that stuff. Right. They should know that the top 5% own more than 60% of everything that gets measured on the stock market, and that the top half of 1%, right, control the majority of the economy, right? In real terms. I'm not talking about just the stock market. I'm talking about the real economy. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. We got that going on. These people are oppressed by that circumstance, right? but they want to turn it against people of color, and they want to turn it against liberals and progressives and the Democratic Party.
And then Trump further and other Republicans further polarize by saying, hey, look, we're Americans, but those left-wing radical communist socialist medicine, you know, it's xenophobia. That's how they use the xenophobia thing.
Absolutely.
Because, you know,
but it's a distinct kind of xenophobia. It is not an anti-European.
No, it's
anti-Anglo xenophobia.
It's people of color. It's the whole thing about birtherism. Oh, well, he wasn't born here. So the thing is, xenophobia has always been used against Filipinos.
Yes.
Yeah, I call it Filipinophobia. It existed all throughout the 20s and 30s in California.
Yeah.
And, you know, and this is where we can take what's happening.
People ran on it. Once again, if we're going to make the politics, you know, part of this history, they ran on it.
Sure.
They ran on anti-Filipino xenophobia.
Yeah, because, and this was the basis.
And they succeeded.
Yeah, they did. And so if people to link Filipino American history with what's happening today, there's so many different avenues. The xenophobia, if you see how, when, you know, don't just stop at the, oh, well, if those were Black Lives Matters protesters, they would have been treated differently. Well, guess what? Extend that to Filipinos in the 30s. You could probably get strains of Watsonville and the riots there.
Yeah.
You know, right. You know, you could bring that into what we saw this week. You know, we bring all that from the past forward, and you see, wow, this is not a new thing in America. This xenophobia that we're seeing, and politicians using it to their advantage, and then using it on the people, so the people turn on their fellow Americans, right?
If you're gonna do Watsonville, you got to do Hawaii first.
Oh yeah, Hawaii.
And then you know, El Centro, you know, Southern California, all right, Oregon and Washington, particularly Yakima Valley. So all of that was going on at the same time. These were all simultaneous persecutions. Okay,
in the 30s.
Filipinos.
In the 20s and 30s.
Working mostly in agriculture, but also working in urban industry, particularly hotel restaurant.
Right.
So
like my dad.
So yeah, I mean, they've been doing that. But see, Filipinos, particularly post-World War II Filipinos, excluding, of course, the Manongs, right? Because they were here before the war. They knew exactly what was going on. All right. Whether or not they were in the war as members of the U.S. military or as members of the Philippine military and guerrillas, right? Setting that aside, right? The reality is those people were, the people who had been in the U.S. were extremely well informed by experience of racism and how what effect it has, okay, including the history that some people purvey of lynchings of Filipinos. And the reason, you know, that comes up, and I think the reason that people present that as history, whether or not we have enough proof of it, right, is the possibility believable? Is it a credible assertion? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you remember the book that was put out by Abe Ignacio?
Oh yeah.
And it was a compilation. It was a compilation of color cartoons that came out of California and national newspapers. In fact, some people credit the anti-Filipino educational campaign, right, to rationalize the so-called suppression of the insurrection in the Philippines, for encouraging people to subscribe to National Geographic.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there was information in there that showed how savage Filipinos were, and it rationalized that we're here to Christianize and civilize these people. That was the exact rationale.
National Geographic is the it's the imperialist porn magazine in
Yeah.
America. I mean, this
Woohoo!
is where you can see, real gangsters and
They
real,
did show full, yeah, they did show full frontal nudity. This is true.
I mean, because that's where you can see, oh yeah, those are those people who need our colonization, and that
How
was
about the World Expo, St.
yeah,
Louis?
and
You know,
that led,
I mean, and same
yeah,
period, same intent.
yeah, led to 1904, and
The human zoo.
that expo there. So you see that it doesn't take you long when you see racist occurrences in the modern day, especially this week. It doesn't take much to link it to what Filipino Americans experienced,
Yeah,
and yet, as we point out, amongst the people in that group who are out there in the insurrection, part of that mob, you could see probably some Filipinos like Cesar Sayak, who
yeah,
was in jail. Cesar Sayak is in jail, but they're probably more like him
yeah,
out
yeah.
there. I saw a
You know,
couple of African Americans and a couple, some
yeah,
Latinos, but
yeah. The other thing that bothered me was a lot of the people moved like veterans. In other words, they moved as though they had had military training,
yeah,
and so that was also very disturbing. I'm going to email some of my friends and relatives who are ex-military. I've had several students that were
yeah.
really quite outstanding students that were former military, and I want to, even though it'll be anecdotal, right? I want to get their perspectives on how it felt to witness what these people did.
And
Uh,
anecdotal is fine, but look, to your point, who are the people who serve in the military?
right.
People of color.
Yeah.
Who are the people who are
Disproportionately.
right?
Disproportionately.
Exactly. Who are the people who are either conservatively religious? People of color. Now you add both those things, the religion, the because there are a number of what was it? Did the sign say Pelosi was Satan? I thought,
Yeah. Yes, it did.
you know,
Pelosi is Satan.
so you take some of those signs, and then you take the religion, you take the military, and yeah, I was thinking the same thing. The
Yeah.
guys in guerrilla gear, the guys who were real warriors. A
And
lot of
some
them
of well,
probably,
it was the way they moved. It was the way they moved when they were scaling things. It was the way they moved when they broke into windows and were able just to enter through the windows. They moved like people who've been trained. You get muscle memory, right? If you
but
trained in the martial arts, you've trained in the military, and they move a certain way.
you don't learn that from playing Call of Duty or
Yeah,
or
no,
rock
no,
climbing at the
yeah.
neighborhood rock climbing place.
Well, maybe they've got dance video that we don't know about that that
Well,
engages in.
but believe me, I noticed that too when they were scaling,
Yeah,
and the way they held their guns. Well, there was
and
Jason Crow, Representative Jason Crow. He was in the House, and he was he was
he
a
was
former
protecting
Ranger.
folks. He was
Yeah,
protecting folks. There were also several women
yeah,
congresswomen that were former military, and they were shielding people.
yeah.
They even taught them how to put their freaking masks on because they you talk about inefficiency. They got new masks, right? The COVID-19 type masks, right? That are total bubbles,
Yeah.
but nobody knew how to put them on, man. God.
Well, Dan, this whole thing. I remember when I was watching. I just couldn't believe it, and I guess one of the other issues is if there was a law enforcement present, a strong law enforcement presence at the beginning, it wouldn't have been allowed to simmer and explode. But there was maybe 60 to 90 minutes of
Right.
people allowed to lollygag and then break in, and then
Yep.
clearly the law enforcement was
There was
outnumbered.
never any substantial perimeter. There was never any substantial perimeter. There may have been some railings up and things like that, but in terms of physical presence, the comparison has been made with their level of preparation for the BLM marches.
Yeah.
Okay, when they showed they showed at least three levels of heavily armed, long and short gun National Guard, right, on the steps, the same steps,
Yeah.
right? We're not talking about a different place. We're talking about the same steps when the BLM was doing a peaceful march on the street in front. That's when they painted Black Lives Matter, right, on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, how were they able to do that without getting shot and all the rest of that stuff? Is because they were peaceful. There was no provocation, right, for violence. What did we see on Wednesday? We saw more than adequate provocation for deadly force. Okay, and it only got used once.
Yeah. And we were lucky. It was only once.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that it happened to be a veteran who
Yeah.
was killed, a female veteran, Air Force veteran.
Well, I don't know how accurate it is, but she was QAnon, supposedly.
Well, I heard that there was she had a belief, she was, she was, her name was associated with that, but she was there. She small business owner from San Diego. It's sad
Very
that
sad.
that it happened. There also, it's sad that there's 5 people. One law enforcement, one Capitol cop, but the others I think were just protesters who were there because they believed in Trump. And so I just recall seeing this whole thing and just my heart sank because I had worked there briefly, 103rd Congress. But I remember when I took coffee breaks, there's you don't want to leave the premises because once you're in and once you're scoped
That's
out and they know you
security
don't
and
have any
everything.
guns
Yeah.
or anything, you just want to like
Yeah.
walk through the place of history. And what a marvelous place
It is.
the Capitol is, with all the
It is.
statues and just the architecture of that darn place.
Yeah.
And like I
Yeah.
said, that's why I took a number of coffee breaks whenever I never got bored with my work, but
Oh, now I know why you got burned. Yeah.
no, no, it was just I always considered it a privilege to be able to live in Washington D.C. and work there. And I thought, well, I'm working in the media most of the time, but if I had an opportunity to work inside the Capitol and to work and to really experience Washington, boy, wouldn't that be neat? And I got my chance, and really to be able to walk around the halls and not just the rotunda in the Capitol, but also all the buildings, all the side buildings,
Right.
Rayburn, Cannon, the Hart
Yeah.
Senate
Yeah.
office,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
through the tunnels. I mean, there's a whole complex there
Yeah.
that just makes you feel like, wow, this is America. This is our
It is
democracy.
extremely impressive. I mean, not the scale looks bigger in some movies and some TV in terms of the separation among and between the buildings. But when you get there, you realize how massive the buildings are, and also that there's great proximity, between the Washington Monument and the Capitol building.
Yeah.
It ain't that far. And
Right.
so you can walk the whole thing. I mean, Linda and I did it several times over a period of just a few days. I mean,
Yeah.
we had to do half of it just to see the Smithsonian's,
Yeah.
all the different
Well,
locations
well,
of the Smithsonian's, man.
yeah, well, this is the thing about Washington D.C. And then I was working there, and when I saw the thing, when I saw the rotunda desecrated, when I saw the offices
Oh,
ransacked,
yeah.
oh, I
Yeah.
just
That
I
was bad.
just stunned, and
Yeah.
because this is the thing about Trump. Trump encouraged this. It was like he was like an arsonist who then sat back and looked at what he did, right? Look at his,
And
what
enjoyed
he
it.
created. And it was
According to people within his own office, he enjoyed it.
right. It was
Did
yeah,
you see the selfies?
enthusiastic.
Did you see the selfies of Meadows and Don Jr. and Don Jr. and this and Governor Newsom's ex-wife,
Oh yeah, I did.
now Don's girlfriend?
I
She,
did.
they're doing selfies while all that stuff was going on and thumbs upping and all the rest of that. That guy, they all got to go to jail, dude. That's
Well,
incitement. That's incitement to riot.
so
I mean, we're coming for you. What's that? That's not a death threat. What's
Well,
that?
this is the next step. I want which I want to get to ultimately, but to go back to what we saw, they use a term like the New York Times headline: Trump incites mob. Okay, so now we're
Yes,
talking legal terms. Incite, that is
that's right.
these are terms
It,
that
it's clearly
ultimately will be
incitement.
brought up. Yeah, ultimately
Yeah.
we will be brought up in the impeachment article. I think there's like one charge that they're working up, and this is
Yeah.
over and above what
There's
the
the
Georgia
original
call.
impeachment, the first impeachment. Oh yeah.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
you got clear terminology, but then the facts, whether or not the facts, as stated in the Mueller report, were sufficient, right, to fall completely under the terminology of the legal lexicon.
yeah,
That's kind of redundant actually when you say that, but maybe people will understand. So we're right back where we started. What are the definitions of these behaviors?
yeah. And
What are the definitions of these people?
so, I think I was in a conversation with some people, and I said I wanted to use the term. I use a term that I borrowed from you from a previous week when you said that we're left with anarchy,
Yeah.
and they said no, this is not anarchy. No, but these were leftists who said this is not anarchy. This is they chose insurrection. Now, how do you view that? Because
I think,
I borrowed the anarchy word from you,
yeah, I
but
know. But anarchy is a large word. Okay, so it's more of an umbrella term that embraces anarchy as we understood it historically in the 19th and early 20th century. So they're probably somewhat anachronistically associating that definition of anarchy and then trying to apply it to this situation.
uh-huh.
And they're saying it's not anarchy because anarchy is actually, they're right, it's much more organized. They do have a political vision and they do therefore have an ideological convention. Okay, so that anarchy is no government, and that doesn't mean that we're going to totally without government, without laws.
Yeah,
It means that we want people to be more self-governing. Okay,
yeah,
so it's kind of an extreme liberalistic position.
but if you go back to what I was saying, that they could have gone to Congress, but they had nothing. They were
Yeah,
bankrupt
yeah,
of ideas. That almost brings it back to this idea of anarchy, where they have nothing. It's just
yes,
sort of this random thing. Let's bash this guy and bash that guy, and but they did target. They were focused on the Congress. But what got me is that when they got to Congress, they it was not in the civil way so that they could discuss things.
right.
They scared Congress off. So the
which
Congress,
which would have even been then. It would have been if they had discussed something in a civil manner. It would have required them to have verbiage. They would have to have mentioned concepts, right? That had something to do with government, that had something to do with social issues. Okay, and if they were capable of doing that, then what they were doing was more closely related to anarchy. Okay, so I agree with the people who criticized your taking the position that this was anarchy and who wanted to call it insurrection. That is much closer to the reality,
yeah,
okay, of what happened. However, it ignores the fact that there were people there with fascist, right, beliefs,
right,
and their fascist belief is grounded in racism.
yeah, fascist.
It's real
I
simple,
was going to say
you know.
fascist, racist belief. And now here's the thing. Now to bring it back to the Filipino American history, and we brought this up that a lot of people, the only time they've heard insurrection has been connected to the Philippine insurrection, which was Aguinaldo, uh, standing up to the Americans in the 1890s, and then
for a minute, for
for
a
a minute,
minute.
but he did establish the Malolus Republic, and they did fight the United States, but
which
insurrection.
which and that lasted what, several weeks.
That's, well, several weeks, but
We like to, yeah, but see, Filipinos like to, what do they claim? What do Filipinos claim? Of all
the
generations that
First
have any
Republic.
knowledge of First Republic, first democratic republic in Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah, how long did that last? And
Okay.
has it ever been really democratic? They
All
don't even
right.
have a jury system in the Philippines.
All right. But look, here's the thing about the insurrection. It was declared officially. This is just the coincidence of it all, right? We had the insurrection in America in January 6th. January 4th, 1902, the Philippine insurrection was declared officially over, even though there'd be skirmishes until about 1930.
Yeah.
But it's just to bring in history, the insurrection. And then January 11th, 1999, the U.S. Library of Congress officially changed the term Philippine insurrection to Philippine American War, which is more accurate, correct?
It should have been U.S. Philippine War.
Not the Philippine
Okay.
American War.
No, no, we weren't the ones who declared war on the U.S. We were rebelling against Spain. Even though it was a disorganized effort, right? And Philippine history always emphasizes the Tagalog part, right? The part that, but there were also other revolutionary movements elsewhere in the Philippines, particularly in the Visayas. That was
Right.
that was probably the second biggest movement. Okay. The other
It's a
thing
big
is that
country.
the
Never
greater
do it an island.
so there was a lot going on, right? And then the resistance continued, not in the Manila. The resistance continued or all around the Ilocano
Right.
provinces. All around the Ilocano. Tarlac was the center of it, right? And that resistance continued into the teens. It's the reason why there was a continuing military activity. We're not just talking about presence. We're talking about constant suppressive activity by American military.
So it really should have been, in your view, it should have been the U.S. Philippine War
Yes, exactly.
and not the Philippine American War.
Well, it makes it sound like it was Filipino Americans who did it, or that the war occurred in the U.S.
Yeah.
It didn't occur in the U.S. It occurred in the Philippines, and the United States was the aggressor.
So
let's get it straight.
So put the aggressor first, U.S.
Yeah.
Philippine War.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and we're going back to this whole idea about the words are important. And if you just
I'm
take
not alone in this, by the. I'm not alone in this,
I,
by the way.
I'm
In conversations that we had back in '69, when we were still setting up ethnic studies, Oscar Peñaranda and I came to the agreement that that was a misnomer. Philippine American was a misnomer, and that it should have been U.S. Philippine. And this was in '69, 30 years before Congress changed the thing from insurrection to Philippine American War.
Yeah.
At least they upgraded it. I mean, they recognized the war part, right? That makes it sound like a larger conflict than a simple rebellion of sorts.
It just wasn't a couple of drunk Filipinos with knives, coming in. Well, this is the thing. Insurrection, and I just know that people who got to that paragraph in history, they know, I remember insurrection. Had to do with the Filipinos.
Right.
Well,
well, they borrowed it. They actually borrowed it from the Spanish, because it was the Spanish in their records who called us insurrectos. So it got borrowed.
Yeah.
So they can't even be original.
Look, I just remember when I wrote about the U.S. I called it the U.S. Philippine War.
I remember that
in an article I did, but it was corrected by the editor to put down Philippine American War.
Yeah, but so you were denied your journalistic.
Well, I was writing it as a a news story rather than a commentary. So the editor, just like they
okay, yeah, no, I understand
style and all that. or every news organization is granted its style privilege, and so that was the stuff. But now that, as we have talked about it, we let people know that it's a choice, just like like all history,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Whose gets written, whose gets read,
right.
whose gets acknowledged.
And what gets popularized as a result. And for a lot of Filipinos, the older pro-American mythology of Philippine history was much more pervasive for for a long period of time. But
Yeah.
the more nationalistic renditions of Philippine history began in the 50s, but they were shunned and suppressed until the late 60s.
Yeah.
Ironically, just before the declaration of martial law by Mr. Marcos. So while there was a growing acceptance of more Philippine nationalist views of their own history, it was sharply restricted as a result of martial law and their intention to develop a more nationalistic understanding of their own history. But that was governed by whatever would be favorable towards Marcos.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the politicians and historians that had been working on that more nationalist perspective, political science writers, I should say, had to leave the Philippines. They
Oh,
they
yeah.
they, they left
Well,
for Hong Kong and Singapore, right? And they wrote from there.
hey, just
Uh,
like Aguinaldo had to leave.
yeah, yeah, but he came back and then he eventually, kowtowed.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's the sad thing about the Philippine insurrection and the republic. Hey, look, you mentioned Marcos, and one of the things that I talked about is I said, when I see a large gathering like this, like what happened on Wednesday, I think of people power. I think of, EDSA. I think of,
yeah,
but
yeah.
this was not EDSA. This was not in America. This was not people power. This was feeble power, because they did nothing. What did they do? They did nothing, and it was also illegal. I
Yeah,
mean, well, ultimately they're paying the price. Feeble power, not people power. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, people gathered peacefully. They
yes,
forced Marcos out of office. People power. A Philippine. Anytime I see large numbers of people, anytime I see any kind of march,
yeah,
I mean, the first mass march that I saw was in 1983, Benigno Aquino's funeral procession. I never seen so many people just marching behind a casket. A million people in Manila. I happen to be covering that story. And since then, we've had Million Man marches. We've
yeah.
had, women's marches. I the the Obama inaugural was several 100,000 people.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and of course we had a little puny one for Trump, which he can't
Right.
stand because it wasn't
So
massive.
sparse. It was so sparse. Yeah.
Yeah. But but this was, this is the thing about the coverage on Wednesday. The the later pictures of the mob, I didn't realize how big it was because it looked really small in the video pictures that I saw as it was happening on Wednesday. But on Thursday, subsequent pictures in the press and aerial shots, oh my God, I didn't
Yeah. It was
realize.
huge.
I didn't realize just how large it was.
Yeah.
And but like I said, people power, it it doesn't match up with what the Philippines produced.
Well, it wasn't based on any kind of morality, and it wasn't based on facts.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go with the first two things that people organize around,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the Philippines, they were oppressed by a dictator,
Yeah.
right? It was a fascist system. That's fact.
Yeah.
Okay. There were people being imprisoned for their political statements, for their political beliefs. Some people were being salvaged. Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, that means disappeared and dead. And so the facts were very real. Here, you've got a whole population that denies that any of that has happened.
Yeah.
So, and then you saw the Nazis. I mean, outright Nazis. Not only
Yeah.
people saying Pelosi is Satan, but you got people wearing
Yeah.
pro-Nazi
Yeah.
materials, right? Not necessarily the swastika. That's too obvious.
The
But
Auschwitz camp.
the Auschwitz sweatshirt, you
Yeah.
know, that actually quoted correctly the English translation of the German words on the arch above the Auschwitz death camp. You know, I've stopped using the term concentration camp because it doesn't describe with enough accuracy what happened there. You know, but it was genocide death camps.
Yeah.
So let's call it what it is.
Well,
Okay.
these people, you know, you look at this collection and you look at what was there. I'm, you know, one of the things that reporters have done or the media has done subsequent to Wednesday is they say, well, look at what the world leaders are saying. Look at what the world is saying. And, you know, uh, look, Turkey, you know, the dictators, look at what England was saying, what Canada was saying, you know, that they're not dictators, but, you know, world leaders looking at this. And just from a Filipino perspective, I haven't heard anything about what Duterte might have said, but
Me either.
yeah, I think he's been
But
silent.
I had this conversation with a couple of people on Wednesday, and we all agreed. There were separate conversations, but we all agreed that Duterte's popularity and Trump's popularity in the Philippines is very high,
Yeah,
and that therefore there's a possibility that among new Filipino immigrants, Trump is very popular here in the United States. I mean, you and I had the conversation several weeks ago
right.
about the exit polls and that Filipinos were no longer number one in terms of the Asian groups that were supportive of Trump. That now it's the Vietnamese, but we're still number two.
Yeah, we're close.
and
Well, you know, I just kept saying, you know, just look at historically, you know, Filipinos to the U.S. and look at how the U.S. has always been the symbol of democracy. In fact, it was the model for Philippine democracy,
yeah,
even though we haven't quite, the Philippines hasn't quite mastered, well, it's its own democracy, right? Democracy, it's not the perfect model like a 3D replica print job. It is the Philippine version, which means it has all the Philippine peccadillos that, you know, that are part of our personality. But what do we say now when we see American democracy exposed? Do the Filipinos say, "Oh, I don't want to go to America anymore," or "We shouldn't have come to America"? What is the reaction? Do you think it's that extreme where they say, "Wow, this is what we're going for"? You know, to see it. I mean, it's almost like a black eye to America.
it is. It is, but I don't know that Filipinos will see it. I think they will, like a lot of other people, not see themselves as reflected in what the insurrectionists did. They will see themselves as external to that, and they will probably think that these people are not that representative of something that's going. You know, it's an isolated kind of population that is not uh, anything massive. I think they are. I think one measure that I heard people take of how many people would be willing to act in similar fashion is 15 million. I do not disagree with that, but I'm very happy to say that it ain't going to happen in the Bay Area. and
15
that
million, huh?
15 million, because that measure is based one on 75 million who thought that 4 more years of Trump was a good idea, right?
Yeah.
and then taking 20% out of that. And
Yeah.
so that's where that number is coming from. That 20% of the people would be willing to act, okay, if called upon, if not by Trump, by a neo-Trumper, somebody else who would be willing to use the same devices and the same argument. The however fallacious, the same arguments are still there. They're still accessible, and people still believe them. That's the important consideration. That's how I start my course.
Yeah.
I start my course with, what do you believe? Because people act on their beliefs. And then we get into a discussion of what people's beliefs are based on. And eventually I tack them towards media.
Yeah.
And that's how we deal with it,
There's a
and then they
silo.
tell me what their source of information is. And a lot of them say it's their news feed off the phone,
The phone. Yeah.
or on the computer.
Yeah. It's, and then there's the silos again,
Yep.
one of
Yep.
the things that uh, there's a couple points we still need to get to. We talked about it earlier, touched upon it briefly. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, the senator from Texas, Cruz, senator from Missouri, Hawley.
Gomert. Yeah.
Oh, Gomert from Texas, but
Yeah.
you know, he's a House member, I think.
Yeah. He's House.
Yeah, but the
The
thing,
McCarthy from Southern California.
Kevin McCarthy from
Uh,
Bakersfield,
Jim
Bakersfield.
Jordan. Yeah. Jim. Yeah. He's near you, man. Be
Well,
careful.
well, the thing about it is, all right. So something like 100 and near 150 members of Congress, but the 8 in the Senate, like 130 something in the House. But the point is, specific people like Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, or even Ted Cruz, right,
Or
condemning.
how about Nunez? Nunez is
Oh,
right in
yeah,
your
yeah,
sweet spot. Yeah.
yeah. They were all condemning the violence, and then they still went ahead with moving
Yeah. 8 of them.
to not
Yeah.
approve
That's right.
certification of the election. So
They
they're
were.
saying,
Yeah.
we don't like the hard
Well.
coup, we like the soft coup. We don't like the low coup, we like the high coup. No. So,
Oh God! Oh
no,
no!
I mean, but the thing is, it was
That
now
was
look,
very good. That was cross cultural too. I liked it.
the thing about it, when I
Woo.
saw CNN use the word coup,
You may have just offended Japanese Americans, but it's okay.
when I when CNN used the word coup, it struck me. I saw the word coup on Wednesday morning early, and I thought, yeah, this is kind of like a coup, but this I called it the soft coup, but it actually was the mob. It was really
Right.
more like a hard coup, and the
Yeah.
soft coup was what
Yeah.
what Cruz and Hawley. So here's the thing.
Once again, the definition of a coup, right, is that it's extra legal action. Once again, not necessarily involving violence. That's the interesting thing. So your soft coup is real. That's actually, and then to usurp a legitimate government, or to usurp a government that is perceived or alleged to be uh, illegal, right, or illegitimate.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. That's all that a coup is.
So it's a
You know.
soft coup.
Then there's a
So
question of whether or not it's successful. That's all that's left.
so what now? Because this is the big question. Before we get to the big question about what to do about the presidential golfer, what do we do about all
And
these
he's
enablers?
not even good at that.
He's not even good at that.
He cheats at that.
But what do we do about these enablers? Because the enablers like Cruz
Absolutely.
and Hawley and everyone else, and a lot of people like, oh, the abominable Betsy DeVos coming out ahead of everything, saying, I quit. I can't stand what happened to, I can't, like, well, I can't stand what she's done to the education system in the 4 years that she's done that she's tried to do something, but has done absolutely nothing. So what do we do about
Well,
these
no, she
enablers?
has done. She's continued to render harm, which started way before her. She
Yeah,
has continued to render harm against public education.
right.
So So she has done something.
So
Now, one of the things that people that really irritates the heck out of me about the media is that one of the terms that they use is they say, this is a failure of leadership. This is a failure of leadership, particularly with reference to the failure to sufficiently prevent, right, the entry of these insurrectionists into the Capitol. And I say, no, it's not merely a failure of leadership. It is a success of leadership. It's the success of Trump. It's the success of his supporters, including the success of people within the halls of Congress. As to your question, what do we do about the enablers? There should be a specific commission, just like the 9/11 Commission, just like the Kennedy Assassination Commission. It has to be experts. It has to be non-governmental people. I would like people, except for judges, maybe. You ought to have a few judges on there, okay? And they should set up an investigative body, right, that independently investigates the kind of positions these people took, right? And I think they should be impeached. I think they should be impeached, okay? They
look,
should be censured and then impeached. They should at least be censured.
yeah,
Okay, they can be limited from forever. They can be said, they can be told, you can't come to Congress anymore. You cannot show up. You enter these premises, we're gonna put you in fucking prison. Oops, I did it again. I'm sorry. We're gonna put you in prison. Okay, and I apologize for that. But that's what has to happen. They have to be held in contempt of Congress, right? They got to be censured. They have to be shown to have violated their oath to uphold the Constitution, and then they have to be prohibited from ever entering those premises again. Okay.
See, that is something we will have to see if a Democratic Congress, because now all the houses, right, are now Democrat. We're going to have to see if this feeling of, because we have a kind of unity now, right, where people are just outraged about what happened on Wednesday. We have to remember January 6th in the same way that people remember 9/11. We have to remember 1/6, 1/6/21.
Yep.
People have to remember that and say, yes, we need this investigative body. We need like a Kerner commission.
Yes.
We need something like some kind of document that says, look at what happened and look who egged it on.
Right.
It wasn't just Trump. He's not that smart, right? He's not that smart to do
he
it
ain't smart, but he crazy. He crazy though.
He is unstable. He is the unstable.
Oh, you see that? Here you go. You say unstable, right? You know,
well, he's
and the guy's insane. Okay.
All right. I'm using
they broke 27 psychiatrists, practicing psychiatrists.
All
right.
Yeah.
In the first couple of months that he was in office, said this man is in freaking sane. Okay.
All right.
And dangerous.
I remember those reports. I remember those documents, and yes, he's sort of proving it out.
They risk their licenses by signing on to that.
No.
Because you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have
one-on-one
contact. You're supposed to have one-on-one contact, right, with the individual, and then you're not supposed to disclose how crazy they are to the rest of the world, right? That's a violation. By now, it's legislated. It's HIPAA, right? But even before that, it was an ethical violation, and so it got translated into HIPAA and legislated, but that's what it was. And they took that risk, and people don't congratulate them and understand that they were taking a great risk to their own careers and reputations by coming out that early with that kind of a statement. Now, what are people doing? They're going back to the book and saying, yeah, 3.5 years ago, these people said this, and now they're giving them great credibility, and they're interviewing some of these people. Oh, you were a co-signer to this book, and I'm saying, well, are you late or what? Are you late or what?
People were trying to be cautious because of
they didn't call him a liar forever. They didn't call him a liar.
Right. Well, look how long it took to call him a liar. A lot of people would say, "Well, the president misled the president." I mean, just to be bold and blunt
What
and
he said
say
was not
he's a
true.
liar. He's a liar, he liar, a liar. I mean, it took a while. Just like that's why the New York Times headline Trump incites mob. That was like as bold as you can get.
That's pretty
Three
good.
three words,
Right.
action verb incites, and the term mob.
Yeah.
Mob is
Insurrection would have been better.
insurrect. That would be four
It's too
syllables.
long. Yeah, yeah. Take
Mob
too much
fits.
space on
But
their banner.
but
Okay, mob is cool.
here's the thing about mob.
Yeah.
A mob also, what else do they do in mobs? They lynch people.
They lynch. Yeah.
And lynch mobs and brings back
And
the idea.
they had put up a gallows, and
Yeah.
there was a noose hanging out there.
I saw that for Pence. I saw that. I couldn't believe that. I put it up on, if you go to my amok.com site, and there was something on Twitter that shows they had you know a noose,
A gallows.
they're going after Pence.
Yeah.
So he's not Filipino, he's not a person
Yeah.
of color,
Pence,
but
the
he
guy
was
who refuses to even talk about the possibility of the 25th, right?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that this is the loyalty of Pence, and he was pretty upset during the whole
I don't think it's
time,
loyalty.
apparently.
I think it's abject fear.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think it's abject fear. I think, and he has reason to be fearful.
sure. I saw that. I couldn't when I saw that on Twitter about the news and people going after Lynch Pence um, you know, was trending on Twitter yesterday. I couldn't believe it. But this is why mob is appropriate, and this is why the idea that you had about doing an investigation and doing a whole thing about what happened on January 6, 2021, it's important because there's a turning point in our democracy.
Yeah, yeah.
Turning
It is definitely. Well, see, there were several turning points recently in our democracy, and about 3 years ago, I was asked by some colleagues in Alaska and at UAA, and also by the Filipino community in Anchorage, to talk about historic turning points for Filipinos. And I say, well, the things that I cite as turning points are not what are really popular among other historians and political analysts. And so I went up there telling them my perspective on what was important as turning points. So you're absolutely right that this was a turning point. However, there were several, the arc is not an arc that sharply turned on Wednesday. It's a gradual arc. Yes, exactly. It's a gradual arc that reached, and I don't think it's the apex.
It's still turning. It's still turning.
It's still turning, and it's still accelerating.
Well, yeah, here's the thing. You're right, Dan, because here's the way I see it. The GOP was all set to embrace diversity in 2015. 2016, they were going to go in. They were usurped by Trump. They enabled Trump.
Yeah.
And then Trump enabled all these folks that were under rocks. Yeah. They were not part of our discourse. You never heard of a QAnon. They were all the gun groups. They were all fringe groups. They were all hiding under rocks. Trump lifted the rock, shined the light on them, enabled them to speak. Oh, they're American Nazis now. Oh, they're the Proud Boys. All these folks. They're not just gun nuts. They're organized groups. They're all over.
Your rock metaphor is a common one. However,
you like something better than rocks.
They were never under a rock. They were never under a rock. They were simply not loud. They were not loud. They were not aggressive. What Trump and the Republican Party leadership did was they nourished them. They nourished them. Yeah. There's an old saying that was attributed to Cheyenne American Indian. I use it in my class. And it is, there are two monsters. There are two wolves was the original inside each of us. And the grandson asks grandpa, well, which one wins? And he said, the one you feed. And what these guys did was feed an element of American society that has always been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their pressure and reduces when there's pressure, opposite pressure from the other side. But over the past 50 to 60 years, not only have they succeeded on the quiet side, right, all the way up to Reagan, relatively quiet, but look who's the first guy that mentioned the extremity of the ultimate executive authority. It was Richard Nixon. If the president does it, it's not illegal.
Right.
Okay,
And you know,
so
and
there
there
it was.
and look at what Trump was saying, or what aides were saying about Trump throughout Wednesday and Thursday. Uh, Trump doesn't believe he did anything wrong. He doesn't
There it
believe
is.
anything wrong.
There it
And
is.
so you're right. Trump fed this monster. He enabled them,
The
and
whole
then
Republican Party fed the monster,
well,
including Mitt Romney, including all of the people who are critical now.
but Trump more so, I think, because
Oh yeah, he was the
even
greatest.
yeah,
Yeah,
even Mitt Romney and some of those, the so-called never Trumpers were, they weren't crazy about diversity, but they went with it. But it was only Trump who like shut the
they
door,
yeah, but they
reversed
only
it.
saw it as a political necessity. They say the party is going to continue to be outvoted unless we embrace some of these people and
Right,
add them. And here are the commonalities. And they looked at evangelicalism
right.
and its large presence in the Latino community, for example, Latinx community.
Well, that's a problem. If diversity in the Republican Party had succeeded, we would have had either Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio as our next president, and that is, and so how much better is that? Slightly better than Trump, but not that much better.
No,
So
no.
here's the thing about Trump. All right, so it's not a rock. They were always there. The Republicans and Trump fed them. The monster was created,
Yes.
and the monster was not controllable on Wednesday,
Yeah.
and maybe not controllable from here on. And maybe this is why the change, right? You're talking about the turning point in democracy. Maybe this is why this is just a little turning point. We haven't reached the height, because there's more yet to come, because you can't just shut these people up. They're not going anywhere.
Well, see, they're not going anywhere because we're not going anywhere. All right.
So conflict.
We're the
More
reason
conflict.
that they acted. We meaning people of color.
Yeah.
We're the
Yeah.
35, 40 years ago during the Reagan administration, when for example, Vincent Chin murder occurred.
Right.
All right. Now I got asked a lot, what's going on? And I said, this is, people are going to look at this and they say it's an isolated example. It is not. You got to listen to what the killers say.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is, we're aggrieved. What were they aggrieved about? The United Auto Workers is turning black, essentially.
Yeah.
All right. And it's not representative of us. We're losing our jobs. And they're blaming the unions, and they're blaming people of color, and especially blaming the Japanese for making cars that,
Right.
that Americans were buying. So here it is. So Americans are buying these damn cars, right, that are being made by Orientals,
Yeah.
overseas and then shipped over here. And we lost our jobs because Americans, we're making shitty cars, right? Remember planned obsolescence? Remember
Right.
that as an argument? Okay. Remember gas mileage,
Right.
during a period of restrictions on fuel, right? And all the rest of that stuff. So the Japanese were doing something that was market savvy, right? And smart for the earth, okay? More efficient cars, right? Less pollution, okay? And we hate them for that.
Right.
And we're going to hate anybody that looks freaking Japanese.
Right.
And so they kill Vincent Chin. They assault other people, right? Now they got two reasons to hate Asians, right? One is we buy those damn cars, or we work for companies that bring those cars in, or we look like the people who made the damn cars. And on the other side, we got Vietnamese and Southeast Asian immigrants. So they're hating them. They're saying, hey, man, refugees are getting attention and we're not.
Right. So,
Government money is being spent on these people.
so
We're spending money on educating them on how to pass citizenship exams and stuff like that. We don't even want them here. You
yeah.
know
So
what about us?
we're gonna see more of this. We're gonna see
Yes,
more of this coming out because the monster that has been fed by Trump and the GOP is not going away. So the only answer is how do we how do we bring them into the fold so that we can at least dialogue and not come to blows?
there are some people who are eligible for dialogue. Notice my choice of words: eligible.
Some
What
people.
yeah, some, and what's the standard for eligibility, and who are the some? Okay, yeah, I can answer both with the same response, a single response. And that is people who are open to discussion.
Oh,
If they ain't open to discussion, screw them.
yeah.
Be warned. Be warned that they're not open to discussion. They're going to they're a danger to the society, and they could be a danger to you on the street.
So,
Okay,
well,
on the street. They're going to be more angry when people start. There's what almost 60 people have been arrested and charged. Okay, what happens when it gets up to 500? What happens when it gets up to 1,000? And that could happen very easily within the next few months.
so
Okay.
you're suggesting that we're about to see a potential gateway to civil unrest, is what you're saying.
I am both organized and individual. I am saying there's going to be even more nuts out there, and like Sayok, not that he's Filipino, but that he was willing to act, okay, in a violent manner, threatening the general public. Okay, we are targets. We
Well,
are targets.
yeah, well, at least with Sayak, what he did, we're talking about Cesar Sayak, the Trump van bomber who was half Filipino. He only stalked media personalities and politicians and sent them fake pipe bombs and IEDs that didn't work, but
Yeah,
they were a threat.
yes,
I mean, I don't believe he did. No one was hurt, right? He just sent
yeah.
these,
No one was hurt yet. They intercepted him.
yeah. So, and just like we
What
got the
about what
guy,
about the garlic festival? What about the
right,
garlic festival?
right.
What about
Last
what was that about? The guy didn't like vegetables. You
Yeah,
know,
last year. Or how about the guy who at Wednesday who parked his car and had the
the
napalm?
Molotov cocktails.
Right,
The Yeah, and he was going to use mason jars, which are glass. So he
right.
knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing.
All right.
Uh,
So the threat is real. How it's gonna what's it gonna take? I suggested we come together and talk, with these people, but it's gonna take something more on a national scale. What do you think, Dan?
I think one, there has to be a clear and present threat of penalties. We're going to find you. We're going to arrest you. We're going to charge you. Okay, and then this boy, is there going to be a turnaround in the prison population, huh? If this succeeds, uh,
Like all the people who were just in there for pot and
yeah,
stuff
just
like that, they're on the street, and all the people in are gonna like kill each other.
we're going to be recruiting more people to the Aryan Nation, and that whole thing. And here these people are worried about the BLM, right?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
This is look. This is the
Who
state of
attacked
our
the Murrah building? Who attacked the Murrah building? And how many people did they kill successfully, right? And
right.
what was their motivation?
Well, we're
And
talking.
and Nichols had a Filipino mail order bride.
Yeah.
I mean, let's tie it all together, man. Let's see where we're
Derek,
at.
Derek,
Where did two of the pilots who successfully flew the plane into one of the towers? Where'd they get their freaking knowledge about how to fly a multi-engine jet? It was in the freaking Philippines.
oh God, we're just tying up all the loose ends here.
Hey, there are no loose ends.
So Dan, this is a precarious. I mean, this historic week just exposes how precarious. I mean, in one of my columns in on the Aldef blog, I talked about Donald Trump, and the last line of one that I wrote on January 4th. I've written one since. I said, I talked about that Trump tape to the Georgia election officials. I say it reveals a desperate man with nothing left to lose, one who appears more than willing to fully expose the precarious nature of a naked American democracy for all the world to see.
Ooh, nice, nice.
That's
I
that
might
is
I might have to steal that. Okay, I will credit you fully,
that
but
is in
that's a
my.
beautifully compressed statement.
Oh, thank you. Well,
That
that's in my January 4th column. No sex, just lies, and Trump's audio taped
Oh
over.
yeah, I remember that. I remember
And
that.
so the bottom line was
The thing that attracted me was no sex.
no that yeah. Well, I said play that tape again.
Finally, a confession from Emil.
It reveals a desperate man with
Age has
nothing left.
taken its
No,
toll.
I have an abundance. I have an abundance. I have a surplus. In fact, I'm, but I'm not sharing. I have a surplus. I say
Nice.
it reveals a desperate man with nothing left to lose, one who appears more than willing to fully expose the precarious nature
That's
of
beautiful.
naked American democracy
Yeah, yeah.
for all the world to see. Because I don't want to say the emperor has no clothes, and the American democracy has no clothes. Just as
Well, in
well.
my tweets and partially in Facebook, in my tweets, I all through for 3 years, and I still do it, but I don't do it as frequently as I used to. I refer to POTUS as Emperor Queeg.
Emperor Quig. Yeah,
Emperor
yeah.
Queeg.
Well, look. Well, I mean, this is where we are. We're in this stage, and as you point out, we're still tilting.
Yes,
We haven't tilted all the way.
yeah, yes.
We haven't collapsed all the way over. Although it looks like on Wednesday we did collapse. So, uh, it should be people should be
Well,
scared,
the
really.
good thing, yes, they should be. The good thing about Wednesday is that it's open. It's right out there in the open, and there's no denial. Okay, all you can do is what the so-called conservative media. That I hate that too.
Yeah.
They're not conservative. They're right wing, but they're not conservative. They're pro-fascist, but they're not conservative.
They're,
Okay.
if anything, they're more radical.
Yes, absolutely.
They're,
That's why it doesn't fit to call them conservative. What do you call them? Radical conservatives? Whoa. No, 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 kind of an internal oxymoron,
the labels are useless.
Yes,
The
they
labels
are.
are useless right now. But if we're
Well, fascist isn't useless.
yeah, but I mean, if we're going to try to get ourselves out of this, we have a new government coming in.
Yeah.
And we have a decent attorney general who will make justice stand up.
Yeah.
And we have people who are going to listen to our look. The
Well,
FBI.
I'm hoping they immediately offer jobs to everybody that resigned from any of the federal offices. I don't care what their party affiliation is. If they resigned on principle from any of the federal offices, because they ransacked and diminished all of them,
Yeah.
all of them,
Yeah.
particularly having anything to do with climate change contributors. Those industries.
Well, look, the Trump administration didn't even fill most of the seats. I mean,
That's right.
when
including the director seats.
Yeah, I mean,
the executive positions.
When Clinton won and the Republicans were out of office, there was a ton of people rushing to get that plum book with all the jobs because they knew that hey, there was going to be positions open.
That's right.
And imagine how thick that plum book would be now because there's no the Trump administration didn't even bother with transition, didn't even bother with filling all the jobs. The State Department is practically decimated. They're going to have to build it up. So I don't know, Dan.
They're going to have to reconstruct the State Department.
They're going to have to reconstruct American government and American democracy.
Oh yeah, because we're already in decline. I mean, the Republican Party. Remember, for 6 out of the 8 years that Obama and Biden were in office, right? They owned the Congress.
Yeah.
So they resisted everything, and then they criticized Obama for using executive authority, right? But But one of the criticisms I have of Obama was, how naive can you be, okay, to think that you could get some level of cooperation from those people, particularly after the first year and a half, when McConnell says it's our mission to see to it that this guy's a one-term president.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear. It's
Well,
pretty
I mean,
clear.
this is the thing. I think people, this is an opportunity to go after. I mean, everyone's on the same page, at least since Wednesday, that the government and the country needs to come together, that these elements that have come out from under these rocks need to be jammed back under or controlled. And then we can proceed as the
The
civil
only way, the
United
only way you're going to get some semblance of, as you put it, control. Uh, I mean, obviously they could argue suppression. They're already arguing that it's within their First Amendment rights for everything they did. I mean, the right wing media is already saying these people are the victims.
Right.
They have legitimate grievances and all the rest of that stuff. That's about as far as I go along with it. They do have legitimate grievances, but who are they blaming and why? And it's all based on fallaciousness. It's all based on flat Earth, right, conspiracy ideas,
Yeah.
and so we can't afford to get embrace it. So we can't say, please, can we all just talk? I mean, it reminds me of Rodney King. Can
Yeah.
we all just get along? No, we can't. We cannot. We have to move forward. People who engage in this stuff got to be punished. Okay,
Right.
and that will slow the movement down. Then we won't be accelerating towards a new apex.
Well,
Right?
we need truth. We need science, especially during the pandemic. But, truth, here's the thing that gets me. What if these people realize that they've been lied to by Trump, lied to by, they're going to go crazy
It's not a
unless,
question of realization.
yeah.
It's a question for a lot of them, it may be, and those are the people I'm willing to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, they're the people who are willing to be rational and say, oh, yeah,
exactly.
we were lied
Are
to.
they
Oh,
are they open to anything? And if you're right, many of them, I agree, are going to be shocked by the experience, and they will accept that to a great extent they've been lied to. The question is, because a lot of people don't even want to accept they've been lied to, not because they don't recognize the lie, it's because they don't want to accept their own feeble character in
yeah.
having been duped by the lie for
Well,
so
yeah,
long.
they
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 just
were
don't want to accept.
embarrassed. They're
Yes,
embarrassed.
there,
They were
yeah,
taken in.
it's
They were
yeah.
duped by QAnon and the pizza parlor
Oh my
pedophiles
God.
and all those all
And the guy brought a gun. The guy brought a gun. That's the scary part. You gotta accept that the whole gun rights thing is just as much of a threat as people being incapable of understanding that they've been lied to. They're just, a lot of them are just in denial, and so they don't even want to get anywhere near the fact that they're lying. They don't even want to get anywhere near the fact that their news source is propaganda. It's outright propaganda.
what
And
would
it's
have helped. What might have helped early on is better public education, maybe, huh?
yeah, okay, we're gonna go there.
No, or maybe free college. No, we're not going to go there. But I
Yes,
just,
we should. We should. This is a failure of education.
yeah.
It is
Well,
absolutely a failure of not only public education, private education. In fact, you could say that private educational institutions are part of the problem because most of them are very, very right wing oriented,
yeah,
not just conservative, but they're very right wing oriented. Okay, so when and I'm not just talking about Roe versus Wade, okay, but I am talking about contraception. They're against even contraception. I mean, it is a sin. I think it's still a venial sin, but it's still a sin in Catholic doctrine, right, to practice contraception. Okay, and it's
yeah.
hypocritical. It's hypocritical because they tell you, well, you can do that. You can try to avoid getting pregnant through the rhythm method, right? Well,
Well,
what is that? That's again an intended interference with the process, right? So what's the
Well,
difference between practicing the rhythm method, which fails, by the way,
yeah.
and putting a cap on it, or using some other device to prevent pregnancy? It's hypocritical as hell.
So,
Okay.
so Dan,
They're anti-gay, all that stuff.
well, let's bring it back to how are we going to get out of this mess? But before we decide about the greater problem about our society and these people under rocks and who have come out of under rocks, we still have to deal with this Trump guy. And the big issue is impeachment or 25th Amendment. And I guess, have I lost you there, Dan? Oh, I did lose Dan.
No,
Dan, you there?
okay, neither of those is going to come to within, what we
Dan,
after
Dan, something's,
today, it'd be 11 days.
hold on,
Oh,
Dan.
you're unstable. You're unstable again.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
I can hear you.
you're,
Okay, you're okay now.
okay.
You're okay
All right.
now.
All right, so repeat the last, all
But
right, let's go, look, before we crept out. Oh, there you are. Oh, you're frozen on my end. How about you?
okay, I don't know what to do about that.
Okay, hold on a second here. This is,
Can you hear
I
me?
can hear you, but it's still kind of,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Can,
Well, I think my internet connection is,
well, let's just continue with that. I mean, even if I'm frozen, because
I
you
can,
freeze up and then it comes back.
yeah, it's
That's just
spot.
administration.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hold on a second, Dan. I mean, let's wait out this. I can hear me and I see you now, but I don't hear you. This is this technical divide or digital divide, I think is the next.
Well, that's oh. Well, see, I've been saying that for years. That if I was going to destroy the American economy, I'd use the internet to do it.
Yeah. Or how about
So I'm kind of surprised that you could destroy everything. I mean, you could disrupt everything. I don't even know how protected all of the weapons of war are in that whole command structure.
no.
I don't even know that. But anyway,
All right.
okay, we're talking about
We're talking about
what we can do about Trump, and you mentioned impeachment as a possibility and the 25th Amendment.
right.
25th Amendment. Okay, I tweeted about that within the first 6 months. Okay. And I said two things in those 6 months. One, this guy has already violated his constitutional oath. He's already violated that. All right.
Well,
Uh,
what did he
and,
do? What
and
did he
so,
do?
and so, he was doing the emoluments. He was,
Oh,
he was,
okay.
he was swearing up and down that,
He's
and
making money off
yeah,
his position.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then he took very strong positions about the wall and how he was going to do it. Okay. And that also flew in the face of, see, once you come across and you're in American jurisdiction, you have rights, even though you have constitutional rights, even though they might be somewhat restricted, you still have constitutional rights. And
Right.
that's the whole idea behind sending people and holding them in Mexico. As
Right.
long as they're not in American territory, they can't assert rights via the Constitution about their condition. That was what that whole thing was about. And so I found that was not only a violation of his oath, it was a violation of due process, constitutional rights.
All right.
Okay.
So he did
And
that early on. So, all right.
early
So
on.
what do you
Okay.
think? Yeah.
So I said, okay, 25th Amendment. All right. What's necessary for that? And I said, you got to have president and cabinet, and then it has to be okayed by the Congress. Congress probably not going to be a problem if you have the president and the majority of the cabinet. Okay. Then he burned Tillerson,
Mm.
or Tillerson walked out, right? He was one of the first. And I said, well, let's see how many people are left, because if you don't have enough people left in the cabinet, 25th Amendment is out. Okay. And look, most of those people, with the exception of DeVos and McConnell, right?
Okay.
McConnell's wife,
Yeah.
most of them were acting. They weren't even freaking, other than Barr, and then Barr resigned, right, most recently. But there are too few people, and Barr wasn't going to be part of that, right? And DeVos and McConnell's wife, are they going to be part of that? So you can see there's already a problem getting the 25th Amendment done. So that ain't going to happen. All right. I
All
don't
right,
care how severe it gets. Okay.
right.
It's
All right. So
not going to
25th is
happen.
out, but impeachment.
Impeachment could happen. It could happen, and there could be enough Republican senators that go along with it that they say get out.
Oh,
Okay, that's
wait a minute. You can have now. Here's some conflicts that I've seen in some of the things I've seen reported. Does it have to be? Because Trump is an impeached president. He's not
yes,
convicted.
yes,
Is he impeached a If he's impeached a second time, does it have to go to the Senate?
no, no. Oh, if he's impeached again, what it has to go to the Senate for is removal. Is
Okay, so
removal.
all right, so he could be impeached, but not indicted and removed. He could just be impeached a second time.
Yes.
But by virtue of being impeached a second time, well, he's been impeached once already.
Yeah.
Does it prevent him from running again?
There's two sides, right, to that, and some people say yes, and some people say no.
That's what I've heard too.
Yeah.
It's going to
So
be an interpretation that they'll have to take to the Supreme Court.
even Lawrence Tribe, right?
Yeah,
Even Lawrence Tribe says, it would have to go to the courts, and you'd have to see what they say, and even he wasn't certain that
it had.
it would prohibit him. So, but what he argued was, you could go. My position is, and I'm going to tweet and FB this later. My position is it's going to end up in Congress's lap anyway. Okay, so that they're going to have to make a law that clearly circumscribes three things. One, the use of the pardon power. Okay, they got to circumscribe that. They got to say presidents can't use it to excuse themselves, their own behavior. They got to put some limitations on how the pardon power is used. In what kinds of circumstances can the pardon power, which right now is limitless. I mean, there's no definition at all about how and when it can be used. It's absolute. Okay. Okay. And then the other thing they got to do is put out other laws that talk about illegal actions performed, what would be otherwise completely criminal acts performed by people holding office under the protection, right, of the limitations cited by the Department of Justice, right? So they got to change that. And so that if somebody commits an act that is so egregious that it's a clear and present danger to the safety of a substantial number of Americans, right? They can be removed from office and put on trial. That's what I think has to happen. I think you got to say beyond the 25th Amendment, beyond impeachment power, there are certain activities that we can plainly define, right? From which where people's authority to act, okay, with the authority that's usually an element of their powers under the separation of powers, right? So you got three different
So
branches and all
this
the
is the
rest of
way
that stuff.
we fix the pardons, but it's still
I'm not only talking about pardons. I'm talking about other illegal actions that clearly would be criminal,
okay.
right?
All
If the
right.
person wasn't in office.
All right. So now, what do you think is going to happen on Monday? We have these articles of impeachment
Right. One or
using,
two, yeah.
yeah, one or
There'll
two,
probably be two.
the incitement to riot or insurrection against the
Mhm.
government, and then maybe some mention of the call to a
Yeah,
Georgia
Raffensperger.
election
Yeah.
official. So we
Yeah.
have obstruction, right? Obstruction of justice there. So maybe one or two. Uh, Congress, my belief is that Congress can stick you through the express lane, 9 items or less if they want. They can like get
Yeah.
this through. You don't have to do
Yeah.
any big investigation. So they don't they you only need a majority, right?
That's right.
So they got the House has the majority. Democrats.
They can impeach. They could impeach on Wednesday. Not only could they confront the whole of Congress with the impeachment articles, they could vote on it and impeach on Wednesday. So then they would throw it in McConnell, but McConnell has already said, yeah, if that hits my table, there's no way, because of the press of business, that I could entertain that until the 19th.
Right. So, but he just puts it on hold like everything else at the House.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
then the new Congress comes in, or the new Senate comes in and takes it up, and they can repeat retroactively, right?
Yes, they can.
And
well, that's what Tribe says.
And I've heard other people say that too. I've heard other people say that, both conservative and liberal, Trumpers, never Trumpers, they've all said, well, then it goes to Congress, to the Senate.
Yeah, once it's been started, right? You can finish it even after the guy leaves office. For me, what's more important is that the guy gets charged. You charge him as quickly as you can, right? Once he leaves office, you charge him as quickly as you can, and the arrest and charge will be clean. But I'm telling you, when we do that, it's going to be the same effect as the FBI locating and arresting people who participated in the insurrection. It's going to, what McConnell and Lindsey Graham said, no, you don't want to do this to the president because it's going to incite more violence. Come on, they're all ready to do violence over anything. Okay, and so getting Trump off of Twitter is a good idea. I don't know what Facebook is doing, but
Facebook is banned him permanently. Facebook is banned him permanently.
Facebook did?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know Twitter did.
No, indefinitely. They're indefinite until after the 20th, I think. But it's pretty firm, and it looks like they're going to ban him. Twitter the other day banned him permanently.
Yeah.
So
okay, that's more like it. Okay. So that helps. That helps a lot. But what I said to my son, who asked me about the effectiveness of that, was that some conservative, so-called conservative, but some right-wing billionaires are going to fund, or they're just going to switch over to OAN or one of those networks, and they're going to make that a new social media site, and he'll have another device that he can use.
So
they could buy a broadcast section, that's even worse than Fox. You saw all of those people from the other networks, these little news networks that were among the briefing room news reporters who were feeding him softball questions and questions that were clearly anchored in the QAnon conspiracy.
The OAN folks, and the Newsmax folks. All right, look, Dan. So it looks like we're going to have an impeachment. We can have it quickly. It can extend over. We're coming up to the last. What is it? We have the last 12 days, 11 days.
11 days.
A week. Yeah.
After today, it's 11 days. It's already past 5 o'clock over there.
Yeah, and so we're probably going to see some pardons, right?
Oh yeah.
He's going to try
to. Oh yeah, I tweeted that a long time ago. I said two things in the same tweet. I said, this is like I think I even did this pre-COVID. Yeah. No matter what happens on November 6th, right? The monster's still going to be there. That was point one. Okay. And point two was the ideal point at which you're going to see him pardon everybody was in that period between losing on the 6th, right, and January 20th, when they seat, a new president and vice president. So that's fully what I expect. So he may not do the volume of pardons until probably the week of the 15th or so. Okay.
Still a week away. Still a week away.
Yeah, that's right.
So our there's still a lot to be done, and a lot of people mentioned his finger on the nuclear codes, but apparently there's been some discussion between Congress and the military, and
Yeah, it's not absolute. It's not an absolute power. There
yeah,
has to be an agreement, because the next level of command is a military general. Okay, and they're the guys, the people who can launch, put the keys in and turn the keys on the president's word. Okay, so the football's active,
yeah,
right? Right, but the launch has to be okayed
right.
by a military leader, or even a couple. All right, so that's the way it would work. So they're saying, well, there's enough of a safety that he wouldn't
Should
be able
be.
to do that.
Let's
Yeah,
hope. I mean,
yeah. Let's hope.
I mean,
But
so
but
the worst thing,
I mean, we should be watching reruns of
Dr. Strangelove.
yeah, Dr. Strangelove again. I mean, that last scene with riding the bomb.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
actually the worst thing that we have to fear is that Trump might steal our tea time. No, that's not true. Golf. I don't golf anymore. I used to golf. I think, oh, this is the way white people do. They hit a white ball into a hole. That's. And then I realized, no, that's not the way. That's not. Hey
Yeah, but
Dan,
see, all of a sudden now, Asians from all over the world
oh,
are excelling at the game.
they love golf. Yeah, women
And
especially. Women especially. The
yeah,
Korean
yeah.
women.
Well, but see, that was because the men weren't as good. They were good coaches. They
Yeah,
were good coaches, and they got their daughters right to be excellent golfers by watching none other than the African American great,
yeah. Half Asian.
that
Half Asian.
the half Asian,
Yeah.
yeah, and a quarter white, right? But he's
He's
a
Thai. He's Thai.
yeah,
Thai.
right, right. Yeah.
He doesn't have enough.
But anyway,
He doesn't have enough syllables in his name, so he doesn't appear.
yeah, that doesn't work. Yeah, he's not South Asian enough.
So
Anyway,
yeah,
yeah, it's going to be really interesting. See, the other thing that cracks me up is that we're looking at the COVID-19 crisis, and then you start looking at the people who are the experts in the field, and it's like three-quarters of them are Asian, and half of them are South Asian,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And some of the doctors, the ER directors in different hospitals,
Uh-huh.
have African last names. So they're also 1.5 or second generation African immigrants, right? And so it's a laugh riot. And what I said back in the 80s was, that's where people are really going to get upset. That's when the racists are really going to get upset. Is one, because they're going to see people that are in positions of great respect, right, and authority,
Right,
right, that and then these people get to make decisions
right.
on your life,
Yeah, they say,
about
hey,
your life.
yeah, they'll say something like, "Well, what do you mean, my cardiologist is Doctor Gupta or Doctor
There's a
only
whole
on
bunch of Guptas,
yeah,
yeah.
not the TV Gupta. He's the Gupta with his hands in my heart."
Yeah. Well,
No, this
but
is the
there's
thing.
two TV Guptas.
Yeah,
There's a
but
CNN Gupta and there's an MSNBC Gupta,
but but
and they're
but
two
that
different guys.
but you are right about how when that's the scourge of affirmative action for these folks,
That's
or
what
not.
they see. They
Yeah,
they think we all got those jobs,
yeah,
because we're not qualified,
right,
right? And
right.
so we got a bunch of not qualified Filipinos running like whole departments of the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins and
Uh,
SUNY Hospital and stuff like that. And they're all unqualified because they're
yeah.
Filipino, man. You know,
Well, this is
how
part
could
of
they
the whole.
possibly be qualified?
This is part of the whole racist thing that we're seeing, that we saw bits of in at that at that January 6th insurrection, right? People
Yeah,
may not have
yeah,
seen it. I mean, they'll express it by saying things like, "Well, if they were BLM marchers, they would have been they would have been treated differently." But race was a big part of that insurrection
yeah.
that we saw, and
It's
the
a
more
big
we,
part of the Republican
yeah,
Party.
and
Ever since the Civil Rights Act,
it's
it's a
right.
big part of the Republican Party.
It's
And
the
so,
pro-white, anti-diversity crowd.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
it's the Dixiecrats moving over to the Republicans because civil rights was passed under the Johnson administration, and it
Right.
was he who said we lost the South. It
Yeah.
was he, Johnson, who said we lost the South. But he saw this as a societal necessity.
But,
He
but
was on the right side of justice.
But you know, the thing is that we think, all right, civil rights, 64, voting rights, 65. We're 50 years down the road. We think
Yes,
two generations down, we have
three
three,
generations.
three generations down. Okay. Depends on how you count it. But yeah, three generations down. We think that we have solved this problem, but we
No, no, no,
haven't.
no, no,
We
no, no.
haven't. And you know,
You
you
know
go
what you were
back.
saying earlier about the rock?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, they just all that happens is they're like cockroaches. You
Yeah.
turn the light on and they hide.
They go
All
somewhere.
right,
Yeah.
but then when it starts dimming,
Yeah.
they know where to come out. They know when to come out and they know where to head for the warmth. And
Yeah.
that's what's happened. Okay.
Right. And if you see, if you just look at all our history, go back to 1619, right? I mean, everything that's happened, 1619, Civil War,
Yeah.
civil rights, where we are now, we have never solved this race issue. And Filipinos have been in as, we have almost been like surrogates in a way, or
Yeah. Yeah.
we in place of the African American, here are the Filipino laborers. In place of the black stealing white women, here's the Filipinos, and
Sure.
we're
Sure.
not going to tolerate that either.
Yeah. Sure. The Pullman conductors.
The Pullman
We got
conductors
brought
in
in,
Chicago,
when African Americans went on strike.
right? And that's, you know,
We got
something
we
that we need
Yeah.
to understand as people looking at Filipino history, that we are part of this history that goes back to 1619, and we have to recognize that, and it should bring us in greater solidarity with all people of color.
I read somewhere uh from way back. This is 35 years ago, and then I misplaced it, and I probably will not find it until I have thrown out every piece of paper that has less relevance to me,
Yeah.
but there were two things that I couldn't find. One was the original package of it was the original Spanish log of Unamuno
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
that cites the arrival of Filipinos and the fact that he sent 20 what he said, los 20 indios de los Filipinas, 20 natives of the Philippines on shore to go scout out for water and wood and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, and food sources, things like that. But anyway, I lost that, and I also misplaced what were we just talking about? What was the thing?
The God.
Okay, I can't remember before that. Okay, anyway, I lost two things, and I need desperately to find them. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I mean, how Philippine, the Pullman,
oh yeah, Pullman. Yeah, I have that. I had that one too
Filipino work.
because I actually used that as an example of we were talking about building unity and all that, rebuilding society.
Yeah.
The Eventually, when the African American conductors were able to form a union, Filipinos joined it.
Right.
There was a rapprochement of the two communities,
Right.
and they lived side by side, obviously because of racial covenants.
Yeah.
They lived side by side in neighborhoods in Chicago.
Well, it's always been the case, even in California, right?
Yes,
The Fillmore in San Francisco.
sure.
All right.
Yeah,
So,
we lived in the projects. We
yeah.
lived in the projects inside Crocker Amazon Park.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were other projects like that way up. I think it's technically in Daly City because it's past the Cow Palace.
Oh.
But
Okay.
they were way up. There were stilt wooden houses, projects way up on the side of San Bruno Mountain,
Yeah.
but it's facing San Francisco. You know,
Huh.
where there was that big PG&E plant down there by Bayshore, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of electrical installation and shit. It's above that on one of the last streets in off of Geneva Avenue. You know,
I remember, and then probably replaced by Geneva Towers.
no, that was flat. They were on the flats.
Oh, and then flats.
Geneva Tower, and you know what they replaced was hot houses. There
Oh,
used to
yeah.
be, yeah,
Yeah.
vegetable and flower hot
Hey,
houses.
remember Miss? Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we could talk about San Francisco history. Hey, look, one last bit about, and we talked about impeachment, which is probably likely. 25th Amendment, probably not likely. But a lot of people are talking resignation, and this is how I ended my piece that I posted on the ALDEF site dated January 8th. I said that, what did I say? Oh, I said that, of course, Trump also announced on Friday that he won't be attending the Biden inauguration, the signature move of the sore loser. And I'd say he might as well resign. He can leave on a chopper like Nixon and declare how he won't have Trump to kick around anymore.
He would never make an admission like that.
But to American democracy's eternal relief and glory, just days remain. And the
Nixon was still an egotistical act, obviously. Okay. Yeah. But it was not megalomaniacal. Okay. Yeah. So it was an egotistical act, and it was a victimization act. I am victimized. Okay?
Trump wants to be a victim.
Trump wants to be a victim, but he's not. He's megalomaniacal. He's not humble enough to say I've been screwed over.
He's a victim as long as it's his own foot.
Yeah.
I'm kicking myself.
Yeah, kicking myself.
Well, he'll be kicking himself after January 20th.
There are times when he has made the mistake of saying, "Why are they doing this to me?" You know, when he has sounded like a whiner.
Right. Yeah, I'm lovable. People love me.
You know, one of the comedians said, "Oh, yeah, you want to have some cheese with that wine?" I thought that was a good line. But,
yeah. Well, I'm telling you, it's. I think resignation would be the quickest way, and in fact, today.
Yeah, but then he becomes vulnerable.
Well, he's always going to be. He's always going to be vulnerable to prosecution. You mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but he becomes immediately vulnerable. So he doesn't have to only have a chopper. He has to have a waiting jet, and he has to have some place to go that doesn't have extradition treaty.
Yeah,
there's a lot of places.
Well, I just note that the Wall Street Journal, even Peggy Noonan has always been, you better go quietly.
She's a righty, yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing is that, about all these people, you got to say, well, where were you? Where were you 4 years ago? Where were you 3 years ago? Where were you 4 months ago? And look, Peggy Noonan didn't even vote. She didn't even, care to vote because she was turned off by Trump. But now which means she should just shut up, right? But the Wall Street Journal editorial board said that he should go quietly. But to your point,
well, but see, they want him to go quietly because if he doesn't go quietly, then all hell breaks loose again and again and again, and they're going to be continually exposed for the kind of people that they really are. I mean, see, what we're looking at is capitalism at all costs, okay? And even if it means that only the top half of 1% really get anything out of it, they don't care. They don't care about the rest of us. They don't care about what's happening. We are consumers of goods and services. That's all they care about. As long as we spend our money doing that stuff and they get rich by it, it's okay. Yeah. They're not in the business of caring what happens to the poor or caring what happens to the working poor, or for that matter, caring what happens to any of the middle classes. And I mean all of them, all the way up to the uppermost middle class.
Yeah, well, exactly, which is why to get back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about people power in the Philippines and people leaving the Philippines to come to America because this was democracy and this was the ideal. Now, for with American democracy exposed for what it
Do they
is,
still want to come?
do they still want to come? They still want to be here. Do they?
Economics. It's economics.
Yeah.
I think the major reason they want to come here is not about freedom and justice and all the rest of that stuff. The major reason they want to come is an economic drive. And that is the reason that even during the Obama administration, a lot of people who were arguing for asylum got sent back, is because they could not make a valid argument that satisfied the asylum standards. The risk of persecution if they were, back in the Philippines, if they were sent back to the Philippines.
It's just about making money, not about freedom, not about.
It's about having an opportunity to live a better life. Okay, so that opportunity thing, obviously, it coincides with money and having a job. Some of it is about status.
Right.
You see people that have middle class status in the Philippines be willing to sacrifice that by taking a civil service job that is less than fully professional by the college and university and licensure standards of the Philippines, but they can make a living and they can put their kids through school.
And they go back,
yeah,
with their dollars, their
yeah,
pension in dollars, and live like a
really well. Yeah, they sometimes that happens. And if the people, particularly if the people live in and around Metro Manila, but the problem with some other people, and I could cite members of my family,
Sure.
is that they built houses, and also my wife's family. They built houses in the Philippines to retire to. Okay, but when they let the families know that we're coming and I'm going to move into that house, there's resistance from the family members because where are they going to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
Well,
So they get pissed off
yeah,
when
you end up
people want to retire back there. And then, my father was worried about, he said, I'm not going to do that. And I said, why not? He wouldn't even go back to the Philippines with me. I offered him the chance. He didn't want to take the opportunity up until he was way feeble. I mean, he was over 90 and he had trouble making it to the can in time,
See,
and so here he was saying, okay, let's go to the Philippines. I said, Pop,
yeah.
it's a 13-hour flight, dude. you know,
See,
but
I know what you're talking about because I have relatives who've come here, taken civil service jobs,
yep,
retired with dollars, and but see, they're close enough families, and they built enough space so that they don't have the conflict of Big Daddy's coming home or Big Mama.
yeah, that's right.
So I mean, you have to have that kind of because it's the cash cow. It's the Filipino
There it is.
cow.
And they still want you to be the cash cow even when you go back to the Philippines. They still want you to be the cash cow.
They still have the dollars coming in from pensions, but
Yeah,
right. It's like this is and we're going to coin this right here. It's the Filipino, not the golden goose, but the brown goose, or maybe the golden brown goose, who leaves the Philippines, goes to the United States, gets a civil service job, comes back and retires in the Philippines, and
Right.
remains the golden brown goose. And
Well, especially if they retire from a California government, civil service. But that's the best. That's the best retirement program in the entire universe, I think.
Are you talking about CalPERS or
Cal
STIRS?
Yeah,
Yeah.
STIRS is not as good as PERS. PERS is better.
PERS is better.
Yeah.
Yeah, STIRS is the teachers and PERS is the public employees.
Yeah.
Yeah. CalPERS.
And university and college teachers are on PERS, not STIRS.
Oh, you're lucky. PERS.
Yeah, I guess I'm lucky. I made a choice.
I've got the broadcaster's pension, which because I only broadcasted because I went to other non-union sort of things, not as great. But but yeah, it's dollars, so I can go back to the Philippines and see how many. Well, well, that's another subject about going back to the Philippines. But this is the thing about when we see the democracy here now. If you're waiting in line 20 years to come to America, do you still want to come?
Yeah, I think they still want to come. I think it's an undeniable force. Uh, I remember that the Philippine government, even before the Repatriation Act was passed in 1935, the Philippine government was trying to inform people that wanted to come here during the late 20s and early 30s that there's a lot of racism and prejudice, and that Filipinos, particularly after the Watsonville incident, where Fermino Tabera gets killed, he gets assassinated by a white mob, and
It was never
uh,
brought to justice.
yeah, yeah. Well, there was the instance of the dance hall, the Filipino, the Watsonville riots. Supposedly it was precipitated, and I brought up to my colleagues who worked on the first fall of the International Hotel film way back in the 70s, that one of the uh, motivations, the anti-Filipino motivations, was the fact that they were organizing, and they were forming labor associations and attempting to form unions. And one of the researchers, who would eventually win Emmys for her own productions and stuff, said, "No, we got no evidence of anti-union attitudes being motivation for the Watsonville riots." And I said, "Well, that's true, that it's not written up in the newspapers. But I was told this by people who lived in Salinas, by Manongs, and I said, unfortunately, they don't have a written history of this, and I don't know if it's in any of the Filipino newspapers that it was an anti-union thing. But it was certainly it was part of the anti-Filipino stuff.
Right.
Okay, but they didn't want to mention it because there wasn't any hard evidence.
Because
All I had was what was told to me. I was
generally,
told I was told that drunks on the street in the Tenderloin area of Salinas, which is probably only about 2 blocks long, right? Maybe a block long, but they were being deputized
oh, to go after the
to go
Filipinos.
out, yeah, to go out and arrest Filipinos, and even white people who were like brandishing weapons and stuff like that.
Yeah. Look,
But yeah,
this is part of the racism that we experienced, and all you have to do is take a little bit of our history and bring it forward, and you get a sense of what those people who were called the insurrectionists on January 6th, what they were about.
right.
And that may be the Filipino American history lesson that we pull out of January 6th, that was a white anti-diversity mob
Yeah,
that
it's a
were
racist
going,
mob.
yeah, that were
Yeah,
going after our government, our inclusive,
yeah.
our united national government. And well, now they're united.
And despite the fact that there were women, despite the fact that there were women who participated, it was racist and misogynistic mob,
Oh yeah.
because women may have been fellow travelers in the sense that they believe that they've been wronged. They believe that government is to blame and all that in very vague terms. But the people who clearly have been consistently the most aggressive and with the tendencies towards violence are white men. So there it is. You
Well,
remember the women who, went after that Thursday tape where Trump said you can grab them by the thing,
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and the women came out with these T-shirts that a big arrow on their bellies pointing down and saying "Grab me here." I
Uh,
mean, they actually,
yeah, well, look at
boys will be boys.
and bring bring it forward. Yeah, Sidney Powell, big Trump
Oh
advocate,
yeah,
right?
oh
So
yeah,
you know, and Kelly Loeffler. Oh, look at Kelly Loeffler, who was there with Trump just a couple of days before Wednesday, and then she loses, and the Democrats win the Senate in Georgia, and then there she is on the House floor saying, "I was going to vote against decertification, but I'm now
I,
voting. I'm now voting for the certification because the riots." And she, this is an example of people, Republicans, trying to cleanse themselves
that's right.
of the
That's right.
fact that they were on the wrong side. And so now we're
Absolutely.
seeing a lot of people jump off saying, like Betsy DeVos saying, "I'm on the
Yeah.
right side." Ted
Yeah.
Cruz, Ted
Yeah.
Cruz, the
Ted
leader,
Cruz of
the
all
leader.
people. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we should be wary of all that in the final days. Dan, look, I appreciate you coming on talking about this. I said this is important history. We've got to talk to Dan for over 2 hours. So I appreciate coming on. Do you have any final words? Final words.
Please get informed. Okay. This is a great way to learn about the reality of government function. And it's a great way, this next few months is going to be a tremendous, much more positive way to understand the Constitution of the United States of America and how it's supposed to function. Because what we have seen is people discussing how the Constitution has been violated by, but that discussion is being held by people on the left who get dismissed, right, as radicals and progressives. So now we're going to see a much more moderated conversation coming from centrists on both parties, right, that are going to move forward and talk about what the Constitution really means. So, the media is going to be available. The problem is you got to stop watching Fox, or at least contrast what Fox puts up, what OAN and Newsmax put up against, let's say, NPR. Okay.
Or
Uh,
CNN, or just read, or just say, I am not going to do the electronic media. I'm going to read the Washington Post to get one side, which is really all sides. It's a very good paper. And I'm going to read the Washington Times to get a decidedly conservative view. Or
yeah.
I'm going to read the New York Times and the Washington
Versus,
Times.
yeah, or the New York Times versus the New York Post.
Or the New York
Same thing.
Post. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
the New York, or what I do is I read the Wall Street Journal to get,
Yeah.
a capitalist right wing view. And then I read the New York Times, the Washington Post
Yeah.
to get,
When I read WSJ and I read New York Post, I'll pick a story and see how they handle it, right? One that's comparable.
yeah. And so,
I feel like I have to take a shower after.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But you're right, Dan. These next few months are going to be an opportunity to understand what the government should be, what understand what the Constitution's about.
Yeah, and
What
then
our
and then
democracy.
participate in a calm, you know, uh, you could be passionate, but you could be calm, right?
Yeah.
Discussion with family and friends. You know, you may have to skip around the crazy aunt or uncle, but you should really be having a conversation about America and what it means. You should be having a conversation between what is America in ideal terms and what is America but in praxis, in real terms.
Right.
You know,
And then also understand why it was that our families came here to America.
that's one of the conversations that I had. Yeah, I was on a panel about a week and a half ago that was convened by one of the Northern California colleges, and they said, well, how do we handle our mission towards social justice when we've got opposition and from family members and things like that. And I said, well, you got to look for common ground, and you got to understand that you got to move ahead, so that if there's too much resistance, you don't want to provoke lasting conflict. but you got to move ahead and around the people who present the greatest amount of suppressive attitudes towards you, and then I simply said, look, from our experience as people who went on strike at SF State, and this is only one experience among many. We also participated in anti-war demonstrations, in San Francisco and all that. I said, if we were overly concerned about the opposition that we would get from family and older friends and stuff like that, we would never have established the institutions that you now benefit from today. It would never have happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to accept the fact that those obstacles can be there. They may last, but you need to move ahead. And the first step in doing that is doing what you said, which is to understand why they came here in the first place.
Exactly, because they may have their, their differences of opinion now, but the fact that they can have a difference of opinion,
Yeah.
is why they're here.
Yeah.
And so let's go back to why the Filipinos left. And
Right.
when they did, and for now, many of them left in the 80s or 2000s,
Yeah. Yeah.
10s, and like you were saying just a few minutes ago, they're leaving not necessarily for democracy, but for economic opportunity. And maybe that's why
Yeah.
the politics is so, not quite predictable. Like, oh, we're all left wing or we're all right wing, or no, people are just here for the money. And and they haven't defined politics in terms of democracy, in terms of that kind of freedom.
Yeah.
But it's there. I mean, there are people who fled because of real freedom and not just
Yeah.
economic
No,
opportunity.
they actually were persecuted,
Yeah,
and a lot of those people were, of course, Marcos era students
yeah. The
and academics
and rich people,
That was they were actually among the first to leave because they were the first to be attacked,
right.
right? Because they were potential competitors at the regional and national level for political office.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's complex, but
Might as well name the Lopez's and the Osmeños outright. Okay, so we'll just put it. We'll just talk about it. And so, is there a relationship between that and the way that ABS-CBN has been persecuted in the Philippines? Yeah. Well,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Well, this is the thing. We want to say the Filipino American experience is unique and different from the Philippine experience, but post Marcos are actually going from the very beginning, from the 1890s. We're all intertwined, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tidings McDuffie in 1934 didn't want to exclude and repatriate Filipinos or make them aliens here in the United States without wanting to establish the fact that, okay, Philippines, you're going to be independent someday. It was
Yeah,
all intertwined. So,
that was the rationale.
yeah.
Yeah, but
So,
why did they want us to be independent? There's two reasons, right? One, so they could exclude us, but
yeah.
the greater motivation at the time was the Great Depression,
Oh, yeah.
and so we were actually a liability. So both of those things, coincide. As we like to say, they coexisted at the intersection of economics and racism.
It was just convenience, right? We didn't need the
Yeah,
liability, and we got
yeah,
rid of the Filipinos, and
yeah. Well, do we really need the Filipinos here? I mean, are they doing anything for us that's any good? And Hilario Camilo
stealing our
Mercado said,
women.
no, not really.
Yes,
No, not
stealing
really.
our
He was
women.
anti-union. Yeah, and he was
Yeah,
a he was a 6'6" tall Filipino. So
but this is an interesting thing. It always it comes. It doesn't take much to connect the things that we see today in the news and Filipino American history, and
Oh,
so
absolutely not. I
it,
mean, it's there are only loose ends because we haven't figured out the relationships.
yeah,
Okay, when you said we're tying up loose ends now, and there really are not any loose ends. We just haven't figured it out, you know. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of this stuff is that people refuse to accept it. You know, they, even after I show the relationship in my classes between the Three-Fifths Compromise and the Electoral College, there are students who say, well, you know, that was then, you know, and I say, well, but then what this produced was Jim Crow. And that lasted all the way into the 70s in real terms, you know, in real terms. And so certain states have actually gone backwards and tried to do that. And you know, the decision, what the shoot, I'm forgetting the title of the case,
To do,
but it was the 90s retrenchment by the US Supreme Court on voting rights.
oh,
Yeah,
uh,
the Voting Rights Act. I think it starts with an S, but
uh,
I can't remember it. But
but yeah,
anyway,
the pendulum's been swinging on voting rights
yeah,
uh, almost immediately after it was passed in '65.
yeah, it didn't take
It,
long. Well,
it,
you know, like affirmative action. As soon as people started the affirmative action programs, there
uh,
was resistance. You know, the earliest case was a 1971 case, and affirmative action as a federal process just got started. You
yeah,
know, by maybe 2 3 years, like
yeah,
around 67, and
yeah,
67 was also the year that straight up anti-miscegenation laws were struck down at the federal level.
right.
Loving versus Virginia, 1967. You
Right.
know,
It took a long time, and you talk about the Jim Crow. I always talk about, when Filipino Americans like to point to the no, absolutely or positively no Filipinos allowed sign.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That was really a kind of de facto Jim Crow Pino law, because it was about, we no Filipinos in, served, no Filipinos at the counter unless they're
Sure.
cooks. They could be cooks.
Yeah, up in Alaska and in Washington, it was the parks were marked with no Filipinos or dogs
Yeah.
allowed, stuff like that.
So
Uh, yeah,
so
yeah,
so we're facing it, and the 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 insurrection of January 6th are a reminder that we continue to face, the remnants of all that still in existence
yep.
in American society.
Yep. And you know, it unfortunately, not only has it, like we said, it's been nurtured, and it's actually been nurtured with steroids under Trump, you
Yeah.
know. So
Um,
so it's been given massive population and strength all at the same time, and it's very dangerous. I mean, earlier on in our conversation, you mentioned that one of the things they're most adamant and spiritedly supportive of is Second Amendment. You know, I got my guns. And that's the scary part. I say that all the time when with my students. I say, if you're going to go to a demonstration, it depends on what the subject matter is and where it's being held. But I said, you always got to remember they love their guns.
well, the mention of some kind of danger. This is the thing, Trump was banned from Twitter because they cited this idea that, he was, promoting, you know, violence, or, the threat of violence was real from some of these things and events that he was talking about. It, it could happen. I think Twitter was wise to ban Trump because of what you just said.
Yeah.
People are, when they're whipped up into a frenzy, you just don't know. Let's hope that we can, as a country, come together and move forward. But well,
You know, this is a lot like the gun metaphor. When somebody fires a gun, regardless of what the intended target was, the bullet does not stop until it loses its energy or it lands in something. Okay, and so that's a good metaphor for what's happened now. is the guns have been fired and there are many bullets. And the question is, what will be destroyed? What will be killed? What will be harmed before they've expended their energy? Or that's really where we're at. And I warn students, there's always the possibility of violence, and it could take the form again of snipers. Remember the DC sniper, right?
Right.
Who was a black ex-veteran
Yeah.
who had an accomplice, a young accomplice, right? And that's the kind of sort of lone wolf kind of stuff that I think we also have to be watching out for. You know,
Well, I hope that, like I said, I hope that the fear of being apprehended by law enforcement,
yeah,
that the public understands that we're in this together, and that they start.
justice must be seen to be done. It justice must not only be done; it must be seen to be done. I think that was in the Mikado.
Justice must be
I,
seen.
I'm getting it from that. Yeah,
Well, I I
yeah.
I hope, because we have still, like I said, a little more than 10 days of Trump, and the worst might be yet to come. We'll see some things next week. I
Well,
think.
I think he's going to be doing stuff after Trump, after he's out too. But I think it's going to be less effective because he's been banned off of FB and Twitter.
Yeah.
But somebody's going to give him voice. Somebody's going to do it, and QAnon's got its own network and stuff, and some enterprising person that figures out a way that they can monetize the whole situation will do it because Trump has such influence. Like you said, how many of the 75 million or nearly 75 million have voted for him are rational enough and open enough, right, to accept that they've been lied to, and then to move in a more positive direction as a result. I just think it's going to be a minority of that 74 plus million.
Yeah,
And
boy.
I'm saddened by it. I don't like saying these things. I mean, I didn't like calling him Emperor Queeg.
Yeah.
I thought it was cute, but I didn't like it in the sense that I wish I didn't have to say that.
Well,
One of the reasons I used that was as a pseudonym. Well, one of the reasons I used that was to avoid getting on a no flight
yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because
hey,
you come out with direct criticisms of the POTUS and you get on a no fly list.
yeah.
And I don't
Well,
want to.
one of the things that I think that was heartening, among the people who was rounded up and arrested, there was a guy in Boise, I think, who apologized to his community, because a lot of people, their pictures were seen at the riots, and
Yeah.
they were wearing their employee badges. They were, I mean, there was one guy who was just practically just saying, "I'm sorry to my community. I love my country." They were just really, they're in the minority, of course,
Right, right, right.
but they're trying to sound like Betsy DeVos. Oh, I'm really sane. I really, this is the limit. I didn't expect a riot. I really expected a.
Well, there's another connection to Filipinos, right? Because DeVos is one of the heirs to Amway.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
Amway.
And Filipinos were way into Amway, man.
Oh yeah. Well, okay.
Wasn't it? Well, didn't you have relatives that were trying to sell you shit and recruit
Oh
you?
yeah, Amway. Look, Amway. Look, you're right. DeVos.
I saw that. I saw that box of Amway detergent in your house, man.
No, no, Shackley. All right, Dan. 2.5 hours we've talked.
Yeah,
That's
this was
how
a good one.
important this is. That's how important this is.
Yeah,
So,
it's how crazy we are.
Dan, I appreciate you coming on. Have a great rest of the weekend. On behalf of the FANHS Museum, thank you for your insights about all the week's events, and let's see what happens. We still
and,
have.
and and on behalf of you and all the Fonzers, thank you to Fonz and thank you to the museum. I mean, not just for these situations and circumstances that we're able to discuss this stuff,
No,
but because we're telling the story. You've taken on the mantle and responsibility of telling the story. That's what we're about. And, I get to say, yeah, I was there in the beginning, I
Well,
was standing right next to Gore when he invented the internet.
well, look, believe me, Dan, it's important and it's significant coming from you because you are for many Filipino Americans, you are, the guy who was there, uh, who helped establish, the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State, and there are many more now, not
Yep.
as many as we'd like to see, perhaps, but there
Yeah.
are still many more now. And this is the important thing. We were talking. We began this discussion about history and about who gets to tell it. And it used to be told just by the winners, and now it's told by anyone and everyone. And now there's such a diversity of it that some of us can still be excluded, even though we speak out, because there's so much of it out there.
Yeah, that's right. That's
And
right.
so, but we got to keep going. We got to
Yeah,
keep.
let's one of these times we should talk about the concept of colonial mentality,
Oh yeah, yeah.
because that gets a lot of academic treatment, but it's not something that is discussed in the general community.
Well,
And
I've had EJ on, uh,
yeah, yeah,
um, EJ David
yep.
Ramos, David Ramos,
Yeah, David,
David. We've talked about all the different issues. He's up there in Alaska, and
the
uh,
University of Anchorage, Alaska at Anchorage.
yeah,
There's
and
a good sized Filipino community there, and they're
oh,
very active.
I was there once. Thelma Buckholt brought
Oh
me up
yeah,
there to speak at her community center, and it was an
yeah.
eye opener.
Wow, I did that too. I did the same thing.
Yeah, it was an eye opener to speak to that community, and because we're all coexisting in our Filipino-ness wherever we are,
Yeah, yeah,
and we all have similar and different battles, but basically we're just trying to say here we are.
yeah. So we'll see. Mrs. Buchholz was a great example of how somebody who was sort of between centrist and liberal in political ideology, but how she, that ends up looking progressive or radical in a
Oh
red state like Alaska,
yeah,
and she was successful, in gaining political office as well as not just a standard bearer for Filipinos, but a standard bearer for social justice.
yeah.
She helped with the Alaska Native situation and all that, and that is an example of somebody whose reach is beyond the Filipino community, and that's really what we should be doing, right?
Well,
Uh,
we have common ground.
yes,
We have different stories, different but similar. There's common ground. Like we talked about the blacks, African Americans before.
that's how we earn respect.
Yeah,
Beyond ourselves. We can't be concentrated in just looking inwardly at ourselves and then defining the rest of the universe
yeah,
from that perspective. You know, so that's why we did third worldism, and that's why we did ethnic studies the way we did. We have not gotten even 50% of what I was hoping we could do done in the
yeah,
50 years of our existence, but there's always hope. and
yeah.
and the people who are in the leadership of ethnic studies right now, it's a very good group. I mean, they're hitting their late 40s and early 50s now, and they've matured a lot, and they're a very good group. I just don't think they're political enough. They're not as well steeped either in political process or in political concepts.
Well, I mean, it seems to me a lot of them are more cultural. A lot of them
Yeah,
are, there's literature, religion, culture.
yeah,
But you know, the thing about the politics is that's the engine.
is
The
exactly.
political engine gets you into realms of acceptance.
Yep.
Some of it is history more than straight political uh, political theory, political philosophy, but
That's right.
just looking at if you know the history, then at least you know the story. But it's complex. You need it all. You
Yeah,
need
you need it
yes,
all. You
process.
need the story to be able to move, and you need to be able to move accurately and towards goals that actually better the
Yeah,
conditions of your community. It can't just be about personal gain.
yeah,
A lot of the people who argue that Trump was good for me because the economy was good, what they really mean is I got great retirement benefits, or,
yeah.
I made money on the stock market, or my small business, grew.
See,
But
that's the
they
thing.
attribute that to Trump, though, and he did everything possible to screw that over.
But,
He actually screwed it up.
but this is the thing. What people say, if you ask Filipinos,
Yeah,
specifically Filipino Americans, why they were Trump supporters, and yeah, they get to keep a little bit more of their money. He cut taxes, but look at it. He also did a lot in federal spending. Look at the deficit. Look at he was against conservative principles in terms of the budget. The nation's in debt and will be in debt. And look at what he's done to institutions that some of our community is held dear.
yeah,
Some of the social systems, right? The
sure.
social safety nets.
Well, you mentioned how many people were civil service. How about the post office, for
Yeah.
God's sake?
Oh
I
yeah, the
mean,
post office.
are there any Filipinos there? You know,
Well,
so
that's the thing.
here we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
All right. Anyway, thank you very much. You can tell we're Filipino because we have the long goodbye.
the long
This was
goodbye.
the
Yeah,
equivalent.
takes an
Yeah,
hour.
this was the
Takes an hour for.
equivalent of exiting the house
Yeah.
and conversing down the stairs
Yeah.
and getting to the sidewalk, and people that get in their cars
To the
and
car,
they
and
roll
then
down their
oh,
windows,
cell
and
phone.
we keep talking, and then they say, yeah, call me, okay.
Well, that's true. I always say goodbye at the Filipino party at least an hour and a half before.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, you got to
So
look at your watch, you got to say, okay, well, let's plan in advance.
yeah. Actually, it works out so that as soon as I get there, I start saying goodbye. But then it takes me at least a couple hours. So that way,
Uh,
it's hello, goodbye.
Yeah, if you really don't like the folks that you're going to have to show up with, then you tell them as soon as you get there that I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave early because I got this other thing that get changed on my schedule.
Meanwhile, 3 hours later, you're still there saying
Yeah.
goodbye. Yeah,
Well,
it works out.
actually,
It works.
now I'm accumulating massive pressure in my abdominal region.
Oh, sorry. My apologies to your abdominal. Uh, Dan
All right, man.
Gonzales, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very
And
much. It was great. It was great. I got the vent. I feel a little better now. I'm sure that we helped each other through this mess, but we're both apprehensive, and
yeah,
we need to tell the community you got to watch carefully what's going on and try to learn and understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Dan.
All right, dude.
Thank you very much, man. Take
See you
care.
soon. We'll talk soon, and I hope this COVID thing is over so we can go out and eat again.
Oh yeah, it'd be good to see you again in
Yeah,
person.
yeah, yeah. I even know some restaurants out your way that are
Oh,
quite
good,
good. So,
good, good.
you know,
We're gonna go. We'll mask up. Maybe we won't need
yeah.
masks. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm hoping not. The vaccination thing will probably be good by the end of the summer.
Yeah.
But, we'll have to see,
We'll have to see that.
DPAA, they're going to use the military
Yeah.
to not only distribute the vaccine but also do the injections, which is cool. I'm good with
That'd
that.
be good. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
All
Dan.
right, my man.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm gonna put you in the waiting room. Thanks, Dan. And there's Dan Gonzales, professor of the College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American History, Filipino American History. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It's just a massive topic. You talk about Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. We'll be remembering it for a long, long time, and we're not done with it yet. And as Dan said earlier, it's like that arc of history is just a little turn because we're just not done turning. This crossroads, this benchmark, this moment. We still got to get through next week and the week after till January 20th. And then what happens? New government. And how do we all deal with each other? Something to think about. All right. So that's it for this session. If you missed any, hard to believe if you did miss some, and he said, "Oh, I left an hour ago. You're still talking to me." Look, the way to use these programs is to use it like radio. Watch it on Facebook or on YouTube. Use your finger to move it along. Fast forward. Some people get little glimpses of it, but let it run on your cell phone. Use it like radio. Do the dishes. Go on your walk. Listen to it. There are parts of it that will, you know, should connect. And if there are, feel free to put something in the chat box or to write us an email. Email me at, you can go ahead and email me at Emil, EMILAMOK at gmail.com, EmilAmok at gmail.com. Once again, if you missed any of this and want to see the whole thing, it will be up on our Facebook page at FANHS, FANHS Museum on Facebook at FANHS, FANHS Museum. I'll also be posting it on my amok.com site, also on Emil Guillermo Media on Facebook, and on our YouTube channel. So lots of different ways to catch this. Tell your friends. Back again tomorrow, 11:30. I'll be back talking about some of these things. Also, there's a thing in Don Mabalin's book about insurrection and the term insurrection. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow on Sunday on the Sunday brunch. We'll keep it shorter, though. Have yourselves a great weekend. And as my dear friend, the late lamented scholar Don Bohalano Mabalan might have said, Mahals and Salamats.